Hey guys, my name's Matt, and in this video I went through over 10,000 games, actually 10,000 just in the Switch alone, in order to find the very best games for learning Japanese with that have Furigana. And so I managed to find over 200 games that have Furigana in Japanese across many different consoles, Nintendo Switch, 3DS, even PlayStation 2, Nintendo Wii, and so on. So many different consoles, and not only have I found the games that have Furigana, I've even analyzed every single game to find out exactly what kind of features each game has that make it easy for you to learn Japanese with, like push to continue, voice acting, replayable audio, pausable or unpausable cutscenes. And I've gone through all of the games to pick the top 100, and so that's exactly what I'm going to be going through today in this video. This video should serve as a really good introduction to what games are great for beginners to use to learn Japanese with. And so this video's aim is to create not only a tier list of all the games that have Furigana to help you learn Japanese with, but as well as creating a database so that you can look up exactly what type of game you're looking for, whether you're looking for a push to continue game or a game with only voice acting, and you can actually search that database and find the exact game you're after to get started playing games in Japanese. The information covered in this video is also available in the spreadsheet linked below, and I'll also be transferring this to the Game Go website, so it's very easy to kind of filter between which type of things you're looking for, and you can find the exact games that are on this certain console that have Furigana, that have voice acting, for example. And so this is pretty much every single game that has Furigana. I'm sure there are some games that I've missed, but I went through thousands in order to create one of the most concise lists of games that have Furigana. A big shout out to all of the supporters of the Game Go community over at both the website as well as Patreon. It's only thanks to everyone's support that I'm able to make these videos for you guys, and a huge thank you to some of the members of the Game Go Discord community that helped actually go through some of these games that I didn't have to figure out whether it has push to continue and so on. Shout outs to Say Girl, thank you so much for your help. So this tier list is not just a subjective opinion, I'm actually trying to make this as objective as possible which games are best for you to learn Japanese with. And so I've created a tier ranking system from S tier all the way to F tier. And so just very quickly, F tier just means that a game is pretty much unusable to use as a learning resource. Maybe for example, the game doesn't even have that much language at all, or maybe for example, the game only has kanji, but you can't pause any cutscenes, so you can't even take any language at all at your own pace. It's pretty much impossible to use as a learning resource. That would be an F tier game. A D tier game is a game that you could use to learn Japanese with, but it's gonna be really tough. Like for example, the only good thing about the game is that you can pause the cutscenes. Maybe there's no other push to continue in the entire game. So it's not really a passable game. A C tier game is a game that passes as a learning experience. This generally means that it needs to have push to continue as a prerequisite in order to get to the C tier. There are some exceptions though, but that's generally the rule. So a game that has kanji and push to continue, but maybe no Furigana, that would be a C tier. It's possible. You could use it as a learning game. A B tier is a game that's pretty decent for a learning game. It's definitely better than a pass. Maybe it has Furigana as well as push to continue. An A tier is a really great game for learning Japanese with, and the games in this tier are the games that I personally recommend using for learning Japanese with. And then we have the S tier, and this means games that are flawless for a learner. That means there is no flaws, no problems. You can play through the whole thing seamlessly. You don't need OCR, you don't need any game scripts, you don't need to write down the kanji manually. This should be a game that is completely accessible no matter what level you are. So generally these games have push to continue, Furigana, voice acting, maybe a log with replayable audio. Everything should be accessible in the game itself. And I've also divided these tiers by plus and minus, and this just means that it's either a really good one in that tier, or it's a game in that tier but it may have some flaws. It's not quite at the level where it should be demoted, but it's kind of down there. So just very quickly before we get started, what is Furigana? Now Furigana is just a little hiragana that's written above a kanji, and this is used primarily to help young Japanese people read the kanji. This is very commonly seen in media that's aimed at people kind of younger than high school age, but still sometimes around high school age. Like for example, Dragon Ball, but even Death Note and even Attack on Titan actually have Furigana in the manga. Sometimes books as well will even have Furigana next to it to help people read the kanji. And for a Japanese learner, this is incredibly useful for you because that means you don't have the headache of trying to figure out how to read this kanji. When you've never seen this kanji before, you don't even know how to write it, and now you're supposed to look it up. It makes playing games and many other things really difficult if you don't have Furigana. But thanks to Furigana, it makes it so simple. All you need to do is just look up the word, you see how it's read. Not only that, but you can over time slowly kind of connect the readings with the kanji. You see it next to each other over and over over and over again. And eventually those readings, you won't even need the readings to be there because you'll recognize, you'll be like, oh, there's that kanji. Oh, it's read that way. And so eventually over time, you'll learn this kanji has this reading without necessarily having to do any direct Anki study. This is how native Japanese people learn the language, as well as attending school for over 10 years. It's a slow process. It's not this rush that you need to learn everything in 1 year, for example. It's something you learn over time just through immersion and seeing it used over and over and over again, and eventually it sinks in. However, there is a downside that some learners face when they're using Furigana as a learning resource, and that's over-relying on it. Now, I don't mean looking at the Furigana, but I mean only looking at the Furigana. If you only look at the Furigana and you never look at the kanji, well, of course, you're never going to get familiar with the kanji. Some learners unfortunately do this. So you do need a little bit of self-discipline to make sure that you actually look at the kanji so that you're getting exposed to it and you actually remember it over time. That being said though, you don't need to pressure yourself to look at the kanji first and test yourself, because if you do that, you may feel a little bit pressured to keep looking down. You're not allowed to look up, and that can make using Furigana a little bit stressful at times. I actually personally don't see anything wrong with looking at them both. Just look at them both and associate them as one part of the same thing. Think of it like training wheels for kanji. If you see the same kanji with the same reading thousands of times, eventually when you take away the Furigana, you'll still be able to read the kanji, just like training wheels when riding a bike. Doesn't need to be this strict test. It's all about slowly getting that information into your head. So slowly over time, the more and more you read, eventually the kanji will be so familiar to you that you'll remember the readings. And that's really Furigana's strength, because the main thing that you should be looking at doing is not being so pressured on yourself, but enjoying the learning experience. Let's say, for example, if you played 100 games in Japanese, you're definitely going to be remembering a lot of those kanji, even if you didn't necessarily study those kanji on their own. Sure, that can help a lot, but Furigana doesn't have to be a crutch that holds you back, but it's more a slow tool to use through reading lots and lots and lots and enjoying that learning experience, and then associating the readings with the kanji, and you just learn it over time and have fun reading, because that's really the most important thing, is making sure you get into reading as soon as possible. And actually, some of these games are incredibly good to get in really soon, even perhaps at the N5, N4 level. There are some games where a lot of the vocabulary, because it's aimed at a younger audience when games have Furigana, that also means sometimes the language is a little bit easier as well. Not always, but there are definitely some games on this list that are perfect for getting started, even at the N5, N4 level. Now, just a quick warning, if you're wanting to buy any of these games on this list, make sure it actually has Japanese available. And the one absolute fail-safe way to do that is to buy the Japanese version of the game. You can do that by going to the Japanese store if you're buying something online, like the Japanese store for Nintendo Switch or the Japanese store for PlayStation. Steam is a little bit trickier because you can't go to the Japanese store, you can only buy from your main store. So you need to make sure that it actually says that it has Japanese language options available, both the text as well as the voice acting. A fail-safe way to get a game is to actually import it from Japan, and you can do that, for example, on like Amazon. You can actually buy secondhand games on Amazon and they're super cheap. Like, I got Final Fantasy VIII for the PlayStation 1 in almost mint condition for $4. It has the instruction booklet still. $4! What the? So like, secondhand games are really good on Amazon. They're very easy. Just look for like the book off shop and you can get games really cheap. All you have to worry about then is shipping. And actually, if you want to buy any of these games from Amazon, or really anything from Amazon at all, you can use my Amazon affiliate link, and a small percentage of your purchase will actually go and support the channel. So if you want to support the channel when you buy the games, feel free to click the link below. And so here we have all of the games that I'm going to be going through in today's video. And this is actually 150 games, but I'm going to be putting it down to 100, kind of summarizing it, because some games are just sequels of a same game and it has the exact same features and functions for a learner. It's just more of the same. So they're going to be counted as one entry. And that's how I've managed to get a top 100 list that I'm quite happy with. So it's actually technically the top 150. And so first, if we go to the very top here, we have Mario and Luigi RPG. And so these games are actually really good to get started with, because these place smack bang right in A tier. And so here, everything I mentioned applies both to Mario and Luigi RPG 3DX, Mario and Luigi RPG Paper Mario Mix, the soon-to-be released Mario and Luigi RPG Brothership, Mario and Luigi RPG 1DX, and Mario and Luigi RPG 4. And so all of these games are available on the Nintendo 3DS except for the unreleased Brothership. this is going to be released on the Nintendo Switch. These are actually incredible beginner games, so I'm so happy we're covering this first. This is actually random choice, so really lucky that we got this first. The Mario and Luigi RPG games are probably some of the lowest level language in all of the games on this list. I have gone through hours of gameplay footage, and almost every single time I look at the dialogue, it's around the N5 to N4 level. It's really approachable. I'd actually go so far as to say that if you're wanting to play an RPG and you're a complete beginner and you're wanting something that's not going to overwhelm you too much, play Mario and Luigi RPG. Any of these games are going to be incredibly good for you. It's a very bright, light game. It's not too heavy. It's quite fun and charming. Really good for beginners of Japanese. So these games are A tier, so that means they do have push to continue, so you can take it all at your own pace. They have Furigana. They even have Furigana sometimes on the menus and the move names, which is incredible. There's pretty much nothing in these games that's going to make it hard for you to use to learn Japanese with. Highly recommended. The only reason why they're not S tier is just because they don't have any voice acting. If you don't care about voice acting, these could be considered S tier for you. But for me personally, I would like to have Furigana and voice acting to kind of really get that most immersive experience. You're not only practicing your reading skills, but you're also practicing your listening skills. You get more used to the sounds. I think that's what makes an S tier game. Either way though, if a game is an S or an A tier game, it means it's very recommended for you to use. And so you can pick any of these games to get started. Highly recommended. Okay, what do we have next? Oh, we have Snack World. This is definitely another A tier game, absolutely. I would say, however, though, in terms of language, Snack World is definitely more difficult than the Mario RPG ones, so it would definitely be more to the right. So again, tons of Furigana, almost everything has Furigana on it, the menus, the items. This game is a little bit more of like a explorable world, a little bit more adventure, a little bit more hack and slashy, you can fight enemies. But it's also like an RPG, you can level up, explore places, but entirely in a learning-friendly environment. Almost everything has Furigana. I would say, however, the narrative isn't quite as interesting as, for example, like a Mario RPG is, or even some other really great RPGs that are later on in this video, but it's definitely a cute, fun game, and you're going to be exposed to a lot of Japanese. This is a really great entry game if you want to get into a little bit more action RPGs. Snack World is available on both the 3DS as well as the Nintendo Switch, but I would recommend the Nintendo Switch version as it's just a much more updated version, much clearer text because it's on the full screen of a TV or your computer or whatever, instead of the 3DS, which is a bit more of a smaller screen. They're both great though. Okay, next we have Wild Arms 5. Now I'm also going to be counting this with Wild Arms 4 as well because they offer the same experience. And so Wild Arms 5 is definitely a B+ game, as well as Wild Arms 4. So there are some really great things about Wild Arms that definitely make it like a passable game to use for learning Japanese. It has Furigana, which is great, so that makes it into the B tier. It even has voice acting in some of the cutscenes, which should make it really good, right? But unfortunately, there's no Furigana in the actual cutscenes, and you can't pause the cutscenes. So that means the cutscenes are just a part that you can't use to learn at all. So that definitely drops it down. Another unfortunate thing about Wild Arms 4 and 5 is that it also doesn't have Furigana in the menus. So unlike the previous games we just saw where it's completely Furigana everywhere, even in the menus. Unfortunately with Wild Arms 5 and 4, it's only in the dialogue for the actual game itself. So it's decent, but it's not great. And that's why it's a B+. They are, however, fully fledged RPGs, like 40 to 50 hour games. So there's a lot of Japanese that you can use to study here. It will be a little bit more difficult because it's pretty much just a normal RPG, not really aimed at kids. But if this is something that interests you, then Wild Arms 5 and 4 do have Furigana. Now these two games are actually for the PS2, the PlayStation 2. So there's even Furigana even on PlayStation 2 games. Also, I'd like to make a quick correction here. I actually recorded a breakdown where I had Wild Arms 3 as well as Alter Code at a higher rank. And so that's what the visuals will show, but I just want to correct that. I actually think they're worse than these two games. So I think that 4 and 5 is better than 3 and Alter Code. The reason why is because they still don't have the pausable cutscenes, but 3 and Alter Code doesn't even have voice acting. So not only can you not pause those cutscenes, but they're not even voice acted. And perhaps even worse, Alter Code has a really tricky font. Not necessarily a big enough issue to actually demote Alter Code F to a lower tier, but just be aware that is going to be the most difficult game to use. So I'd say all of these are in the B+, and if you wanted to play some Wild Arms games, I would recommend either Wild Arms 4 or 5. All of these games are on the PlayStation 2, by the way. So just letting you know, the tier list visual I have in the background will sometimes not be completely accurate, as there are a couple of corrections I'm going to be making in this video. However, at the end of the video, I will go through everything and just kind of verify and make sure that I'm happy with all the placements. And just remember, you can check the Game Go website or the spreadsheet down below to check any of the information you want to know about any particular game. Sorry about needing to do some corrections, but as I'm editing this video, I'm kind of realizing, I don't quite agree with that. And as I'm collecting footage, I'm realizing, so there are about 10 corrections in this video, and I'll let you know as they happen, so you won't be thinking any wrong information or anything. Anyway, back to the video. Okay, next we have, Dragon Quest IX. This is one of my personal favorite games, not for learning Japanese, but just one of my personal favorites because it's actually one of the games that I personally used when I was starting learning Japanese. I have very fond memories of this game. That being said though, I definitely know a lot about its faults as well. So Dragon Quest IX is for the DS, not the 3DS, the DS, but it does have Furigana. That puts it up to the B rank. There are no cutscenes you need to worry about, so everything's pushed to continue, so it should be very similar to an A tier. But because it is on the Nintendo DS, unfortunately the font isn't very high resolution, so I need to drop it down to an A-. It is a huge RPG. I think it took me like 100 hours or something just to play it all and perfect everything. It's really cool. Furigana and all of the dialogue, it's such a charming world. But unfortunately, not all of the game has Furigana, as the menus, the DS is so small, it's hard to actually get Furigana on the menus, and the text itself, even without the Furigana, the text itself is pretty difficult to read. So it is a great game. I couldn't justify putting it on B tier. It's definitely in the A tier, but it's just the A- because it has some serious faults. It's great if you're up for a challenge, but there's definitely much better options. Next we have Mario and Sonic at the Tokyo Olympics 2020. This really took me by surprise. I actually never played this game, and I discovered this game by going through the lists on the Switch. This is really, really cool. So this is one of the Olympic games. There are actually many made, but this is one of the only ones with Furigana. And so you get to play like a bunch of like Olympic themed mini games and stuff like that, but this game actually has a decent sized story mode. So you get to see all your favorite characters talking with each other set in the Olympics. You learn a whole bunch of almost kind of real life language because it's talking about the actual Olympics. So you learn things about sports, but also just normal conversational language, and even the informational screens, the instructions have full Furigana. So this game is incredibly good for a learner. It doesn't necessarily have like a 50-hour RPG. It's only like a couple of hours long. But as a learner, you'll probably be going through it quite slow. So there's a lot of dialogue that you'll be able to get from this game. And you get to see all your favorite characters talking to each other while you learn Japanese. A very nice one. There are even some retro sections which look really cool and sound very cool that are actually written all in hiragana, so you get a lot of hiragana practice as well. And there's even a demo available if you want to try it out yourself. So this game is definitely an A tier game. I would say the language is easier than Snackworld, but not quite as easy as Mario and Luigi RPG games. They're really recommended for beginners, but it's still quite easy and low level. So Mario and Sonic Tokyo 2020 Olympics has pushed to continue, Furigana, no voice acting, but no cutscenes you need to worry about. So it's very usable as a learning game. Okay, what do we have next? And next we have the Bokujo Monogatari series. Here we have 2 games for the Nintendo Switch. These are now known as Story of Seasons instead of Harvest Moon, but it's the same kind of DNA. It's just been renamed. So we have Story of Seasons Friends of Mineral Town on the Nintendo Switch, as well as Story of Seasons Pioneers of Olive Town. So both of these games have Furigana and push to continue, so we're going to be putting them at around the B+ level. And the reason why is because there's some games at the B level that are actually not necessarily as good as this, with being a little bit easier than Wild Arms. And so these are both really decent games for learning Japanese with the Furigana and the push to continue, but unfortunately not the entire game has Furigana, and especially for a game like this where you're actually wanting to like pick up items and kind of do farm life and grow your farm and build your village, you really want the menu to be fully Furigana so you can actually learn all of that language. Unfortunately though, it's kanji only the dialogue has Furigana. So unfortunately it doesn't quite get to an A tier. But they're pretty decent games for learning Japanese, especially with the dialogue, and so that's why they're here in the B+. But just so you know, every game that's going to make it in the top 100 is a good game for learning Japanese with. But some of them have more flaws than others. Ooh, speaking of interesting flaws, my god, we have Kimetsu no Yaiba. Demon Slayer. This game is super tricky to place on the tier list. So let's have a look here and see what the benefits this game has. So of course it has Furigana, but very interestingly, this game only has Furigana for kanji that are above grade 2 level. So we're talking really young. Only grade 1 kanji don't have Furigana. If you think of this in the kanken, there are 10 levels in the kanken. Only level 10, the very lowest kanji, don't have Furigana. So this is really basic words like iku to go, miru to see, and things like that. But most of the kanken 9 and up have Furigana, so this makes it pretty much completely usable for any beginner learner of Japanese. As long as you've learned about the first 80 kanji, the most essential kanji, then you're probably going to be alright. This game has Japanese voice acting everywhere in these beautiful cutscenes. It's so pretty, so interesting. You get to relive all the moments of Kimetsu no Yaiba. It's such an amazing experience. The voice acting, the Furigana. There are moments where it's pushed to continue, but there are a lot of cutscenes in this game, and this is where it gets a bit tricky to put on the rankings because the cutscenes are pausable. That's great. Although I found a weird bug where before you actually unlock the storyboard part where you can actually choose what chapter to go to, for some reason the background is blurred and so you can't read the text. But once you finish the first level and unlock the storyboard, then that blur goes away. It's really weird. I'm not sure why, but it's just something I noticed. And so because there's chapter select, there's also replayable scenes, so you can play the scene over and over and over again to keep testing your Japanese. Now, so that's incredible, right? You can replay the scenes, you can pause the scenes, you can even pause the gameplay while you're fighting the battles. This is actually quite rare for these type of games, so you can press the pause button whenever a character talks while you're in the middle of combat, and then read what they have to say and study it. That's incredible. So far, everything that I've said should make it pretty close to an S tier, right? Like, I felt really impressed when I was playing it, but the problem is that because there's so many cutscenes, and that isn't pushed to continue like automatically like some other games in this list, that means that it's only accessible if you press the pause button in time before the line disappears. That means you either have to press it as soon as it appears, somewhere in the middle and cut some of the voice acting out, or listen to the voice acting and then quickly press the button and hope it doesn't disappear in time for you to learn with. This is really unfortunate because I think it could be amazing for a Japanese language learner, amazing for listening experience because you get to listen, read along, and it's so interesting and beautiful. But unfortunately, because it does have flaws, I want to put it at S-, but honestly, if it's an S tier, it shouldn't really have any flaws, so I'm putting it at an A+. It has a really impressive balance with the Furigana, the voice acting. It's super interesting. You can take the combat all at your own pace and everything. There's Furigana everywhere. So you can see how I've ranked it above Mario RPG in terms of features that it has for learning Japanese, because you even get to practice your listening, but it has some flaws. It's a little bit trickier to use, but it's still really, really, really good. And so once you've learned about the JLPT N5 kanji, you'll be ready to play this game. This game is also available everywhere with the Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 5 and 4, PC, so you should easily be able to get your hands on a Japanese version of this game. Just pick whichever console has the Japanese in it. But as I said before, just make sure that it actually has the Japanese language options. It's always safe just to buy the Japanese version. It's very difficult for me to say exactly whether a game has Japanese when you buy the English version because I don't know what region you are and it could change, and it's actually really difficult for me to find out being in Japan because I just see the Japanese. So this is something you really got to be careful with. Oh, next we have The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Now, I'm not going to be pairing this game with Breath of the Wild. I almost could have, but I feel like they're just a little bit distinct enough to put as separate entries. So, what incredible games, right? So much fun to have. The fact that they have Furigana is really, 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 really good. Push to continue as well. There even is some voice acting here and there. But unfortunately, that's where the positives start to end. For me, Tears of the Kingdom is definitely an A-tier game, but it doesn't quite get to the heights of S-tier and A+. A is still a very good game to use, but unfortunately it does have some flaws, and it's definitely on the difficult end of language. It's definitely way more difficult, higher level language than all of these games. And the flaws are, unfortunately, you cannot pause the cutscenes, so that's a huge drawback. There are some cutscenes in this game, you can't pause them. There is actually a log in this version of the game, so that's kind of cool, right? So you could actually check the log, but unfortunately the log is only available while you're in the middle of a conversation. So that's just really weird and not that super reliable for a learner. Also, another huge downside of Tears of the Kingdom is there isn't any furigana on the items in the descriptions and things like that. So again, it just makes it so difficult to use. So it's a great game, it really is, and the fact that there's like so many people you can talk to, a huge world to explore, all with furigana to help you and enjoy, it is really, really good. But it just has a few flaws to stop it from being perfect. And so that's why it's definitely an A tier game. I don't feel comfortable putting it below A. I don't feel comfortable putting it down in the B tiers. It's definitely way better than the B tiers. A minus, yeah, it could be an A minus. It could be somewhere in between like an A and an A minus. Personally, I'm gonna put it at the A tier. Oh, here's an interesting next one. Here we have Girls Mode for the Nintendo 3DS. And so there's actually 3 games in this series, and these are kind of like fashion games. So if you're a person that's interested in fashion, doing makeup and stuff like that, then these will be great for learning vocab in that area. And they're quite unique in that way, right? There's not too many games that I can say that are going to teach you fashion language like handbags and clothes and outfits and all that kind of stuff. Makeup and all that kind of stuff. So this is a really unique and interesting game if you're interested in this kind of thing. Now, there is quite a bit of story, right? Like the actual people will actually like react to things and you kind of, talk about fashion and stuff. So they're pretty decent. I wouldn't quite put them at the level of Mario RPG or anything. And the font is a little bit difficult to read. So I would say an A minus. And the reason why is because these games do have furigana and push to continue, but nothing else. They don't have voice acting or anything like that. Also, the amount of text in the games isn't quite as much as any of the games in the A tier, and so that's why it's here in the A minus. So all 3 of these games will be going in the A minus tier. They're definitely great for getting some reading practice if this is something that you're interested in, if you're kind of focused on fashion and stuff like that, these could be the games for you. Okay, and next we have, oh, there's a big one. We have Another Code. This is actually a remake of some of the previous games that were for the Nintendo Wii. Another Code is definitely in the S tier. Definitely. Push to continue. Voice acting. Replayable audio with a log. But there is one downside. There are cutscenes that you can't always pause, and so it is an S tier with a very minor negative. But it's not a real negative because there's the log with replayable audio, so you can always go back and listen to the audio again if there's a moment that you can't pause. That makes this game perfect for a language learner, and this is the first S tier game for this list. This is a really cool game. If you want to check out more, I actually made a video just on this game alone. It's quite interesting for a Japanese language learner, and I go into a lot of detail for exactly why this is good for a language learner. But here, Another Code recollection for the Nintendo Switch goes into the S minus. One thing I really like about this game is it's visually really nice. It has this kind of storyboard-esque type feel to it where you kind of have these manga cutouts. You actually explore an island. You have to do a little bit of like puzzle solving and stuff. So it's really cool. You actually interact with the language. Like you have to pick up something and put it over the cliff. You actually have to kind of read the Japanese and actually use it in a way. In order to solve the puzzles, your comprehension of Japanese is required. So it's actually quite an interesting and unique game. And this is actually a remake. So there's actually 2 games in one that you get if you buy the recollection for the Nintendo Switch. Next up, we have Dragon Quest Builders 2. Oh my, I played so much of this game. I actually finished this entire game. I played it in Japanese and it was a really fun experience. So Dragon Quest Builders 2 is almost like a kind of Minecraft type game where you explore a very Dragon Quest-y world, listening to very Dragon Quest-y music, seeing Dragon Quest-y characters. But you actually get to build stuff with kind of Minecraft style blocks, but it's a little bit more clearer, the things you actually make, and a little bit more prettier. You actually build these full-fledged towns and everything, and there's some crazy stuff people have done with it online that they actually make these incredible huge towns and everything. It's really impressive what people can do. It's a really fun game. It has a full story that's like a decent RPG. It goes for a really long time. All of it is push to continue with furigana. Unfortunately, there's no voice acting. I would like to actually put it in the A tier, but unfortunately, because it has some flaws, I need to put it down into the A minus, and it's definitely more difficult language-wise than Girls Mode, which I should probably also put Dragon Quest IX there as well. I would say they're very similar in terms of language, actually, perhaps a little bit easier than Dragon Quest IX. So Dragon Quest Builders, unfortunately, its negatives are that there isn't any furigana on the item description. So again, this makes it really difficult to use. And we saw previously, I put some down there in B+ for that very same fact. But Dragon Quest Builders 2 has a huge story. It's definitely a bit more polished than the Harvest Moon game, so it's very similar on that line with A- and B+. It's a great game for learning Japanese with. I just wish the items had Furigana so that makes it easier and more approachable for a language learner. Oh, and next we have Girls RPG. What a unique entry here. This is actually made by Level 5. This is a game where you roleplay as a hostess, known in Japan as someone who works at a kyabakura. So this is a really funny title because, yeah, you have to play as a cabaret girl, a hostess, someone who flirts with guys for their profession and, you know, drinks a lot of alcohol and stuff. I'm not sure there's too much drinking in this game, but definitely a lot more of the flirting and stuff. So you get to see a bit of a kind of more cheeky dialogue, a bit more human interaction, a bit more social dating type language. It's quite an interesting entry. Definitely didn't imagine this to have Furigana. And the reason why is because it's actually made by Level 5. The same people who made Ni no Kuni and Yokai Watch and all that, they made this Kabakura girl with Furigana. So if you've ever had a dream of living out your life as a hostess, working at a hostess club, this is the game for you. And so this game is on the Nintendo 3DS. It has Furigana and push to continue, but nothing else. It doesn't have voice acting or anything like that. And so this game is definitely useful for a Japanese language learner. A lot of really useful vocabulary, dating life type language and stuff like that. Really interesting. So it's definitely an A tier. In terms of difficulty, I would probably place it somewhere here-ish. It's not quite as difficult as Snack World. It's definitely more difficult than Mario & Luigi RPG is because it deals with more real life type stuff. It's not so simple in its dialogue. And I'd say it's probably easier than the Olympics game. So it's somewhere here in the middle, but definitely in the A tier because it's completely accessible. Everything has Furigana on it. And so it's completely usable as a study game if you've ever wanted to live out your life as a hostess. Next, we have one of my favorite games ever, and this is going to be 2 games in one. Here we have Crayon Shin-Chan's Boku no Natsuyasumi. This is kind of a reboot of the Boku no Natsuyasumi series, but with Crayon Shin-Chan as the main character. And these 2 games are incredibly good for Japanese language learners. Straight away, both of them have to be S tier, absolutely S tier. The names are quite long, like the English name is Shinchan, me and the professor on summer vacation, the endless 7-day journey. And the other one's Shinchan, Shiro and the Cold Town. Definitely in the S tier. These games have push to continue, Furigana, they even have voice acting. There's not really any cutscenes you need to worry about, so you can take most of it at your own pace. However, I will say the first game had a couple of lines, like 6 lines or so in the intro that auto-progressed. And that was kind of to give a sense of urgency in the way the person was talking. So that's a tiny little minus. So I put it down to S tier, for example, right? S minus, tiny little minus. It's not really deserving of being demoted down to S minus, but really anything in the S tier is amazing. I'm just being quite concise with my placement. These games are incredible. Possibly some of my favorite on the entire list. So the first game very much functions exactly the same as a Boku no Natsuyasumi game. What that means is the Boku no Natsuyasumi games are famous for going to the Japanese countryside, living with your grandparents, for example, and you get to spend the life of living at your family's home in the countryside. Beautiful environments. You get to learn language that you can actually really apply in real life because you go to the mountains, you collect bugs, you go to onsens, you eat food. There's a lot of like real life language in these games. Super interesting, very immersive to kind of be in the Japanese environment. So the first game progresses just like Boku no Natsuyasumi, where the day and night kind of auto progresses. And so, you know, you go out, you explore, everything you do takes some time, and then the sun sets, you go eat dinner, and then you repeat the day. However, the second game is different. They get rid of that function. Now you can take as much time as you want, explore the world, and they even added this whole new Cold Town, which is almost like a retro era, Showa era town. So you get like 2 games in one, but this second game is even better than the first game. This second is completely different level of the first game. The first game was incredible. I made a video on it, check it out, it's amazing, I love it. But the second game is even better because there's so many more items that you can engage with. In order to progress the game, you actually have to progress the game, not just for the day to pass. So you actually have to collect things. When you collect things, you can make things. So for example, there's like cooking and stuff like that, so you have to actually find the items. But when you find the items, like the herbs around in the nature and the forest and everything, they have full written descriptions of those items. So you get immersed into actual Japanese food, you get descriptions about that food, all with Furigana, all push to continue. Amazing, amazing game. I really love these two games. You should probably play this one first and then play this one. It doesn't really matter though. They're incredible. So good. And the fact that they do have some voice acting, just incredible. It's not fully voice acted, but it definitely has enough to keep it really interesting. I want to put them at S, but I'm just being very conservative because there could be some flaws, like some moments when dialogue kind of skips, but very rarely. Definitely incredible games for learning Japanese with. Highly recommend. And so both of these games are available on the Nintendo Switch as well as on Steam, and the first game is also available on PS4, PS5. Okay, next we have the Nintendo 3DS Yokai Watch games, and there's a lot of them. So these games include Yokai Watch 1, 2, 3, Yokai Watch Busters 1 and 2, as well as Yokai Sangokushi. So these are all the games that are on the 3DS. So I'll be putting them all in the exact same bracket as they're all pretty much the exact same experience for a language learner, just with different flavor, or more of the same. So let's go through them in order. We have Yokai Watch 1, 2, and 3. These are the original games, and this is just for the 3DS version of number 1. These games have push to continue, Furigana absolutely everywhere, incredibly beginner friendly. I could put them, for example, in the S tier, but there are some flaws. Unfortunately, you're unable to pause the cutscenes, so putting it down to the A+ tier. Definitely easier than Kimetsu no Yaiba in terms of the language, but I will say there is some tricky stuff with the Yokai Watch games. Because they're trying to be really cool and hip for young kids, they often use a lot of slang, and a lot of the yokai actually end their sentences in weird enders. So there is a lot of like kind of more unnatural, kind of over-exaggerated Japanese, but there is a lot of really easy language use because it is aimed at younger children. And there's really interesting Japanese culture with the yokai and the mythology and everything, and even the characters' names. And you're in Japan, you're actually living in Japan, you walk around, you get to see Japanese environments and people and schools and all that kind of stuff. So it's a really cool, immersive game. I really want to put these games in S tier, but unfortunately I have to put them in A+ because you cannot pause the cutscenes. Well, you can, but the text isn't visible. And so Yokai Watch 1, 2, and 3 here is in the A+. I don't have a card for Yokai Watch 1 because it actually has a different spot for the Nintendo Switch release, which is even better. The Busters games are pretty much the same, but instead of the main character being the boy or the girl, now the main characters are the yokai themselves, and it's a little bit different twist on the series. But same thing, plenty of Japanese, push to continue, Furigana, really interesting, great music, made by Level 5, all of that wonderful polish and charm. Level 5, you're gonna love Level 5 by the end of this video. And so Yokai Watch Busters 1 and 2 also in the A+, and then finally we have Sangokushi, and this is a little bit different from the other ones. It's a little bit more difficult in terms of the language because it's actually more of like a strategy RPG type thing. Think like a Fire Emblem. In fact, it's very similar to Fire Emblem meets Pokemon. You have the kind of grid-based battles. It's a bit more like chess. You have the moves that beat the other moves. Like, you know, you have swords and axes, right? They beat each other. Same thing here, but now there's like types, and there's even elemental types that beat different elemental types. And so it's quite complicated in terms of the actual battle, but it's quite fun. And it's extra Japanese because it's actually kind of had a bit of a time slip. So there's like samurai and stuff, and some of the yokai have like samurai personalities and stuff. Really cool one. It's definitely a bit more difficult language-wise than the others, and a bit more difficult gameplay-wise than the others, but I was quite enjoying playing it. Full Furigana everywhere. Amazing for learners. These games also don't really have much voice acting. There is the cutscenes, but you can't pause them, so that's just going to be a little bit of listening practice, unfortunately. If you could pause them, they would be S tier, definitely. Next, we have a cute little entry. We have WanNyan Pet Shop. So this is a cute game. You actually have to run a pet shop. Full Furigana, push to continue, you get to interact with the cute pets, take care of the shop, talk to people, very real life type stuff. It's like you have a part-time job working at a pet shop, and you get to learn the language that you would learn if you worked part-time at a pet shop. Now, this one's tricky. I would like to put it as an A because it does have Furigana, push to continue, and it even has voice acting in parts. Should be incredible, right? I just don't think there's enough actual story in the game. Like, it does have quite a lot of dialogue to use. It's really, really good. It really is. But I just think it's a little bit more gameplay than story, and a lot of the dialogue kind of is repetitive because you're doing the same tasks, like, good job, do that again, that type of stuff. Very interesting. I almost feel bad for putting a game that has voice acting and push to continue and Furigana in the B+. It's just not... it's tough. It could be comparable to Girls Mode, I guess, but Girls Mode has a bigger story mode. There's like a lot of conversation with NPCs about your fashion and stuff. So it's got to be somewhere around here. I think the language overall is probably easier than the farming games because it's real life type stuff, and there's not really going to be any language that's like way too difficult or high level or anything like that. So it's quite an easy game, quite a fun little cute game here. It could be A-, B+. It's difficult in these kind of borders, like S-, A+ is very similar. There's just these small little differences. Same thing here with the A- and the B+. A very cute game though, and very good one for learning some pet themed vocabulary and getting some reading practice. Furigana, push to continue, and even some voice acting. Okay, next we have, Spy Family Operation Diary, another unique entry. So this game is adorable. It definitely is up there in the A tier, and in fact, I'd have to put it in the A+ tier because it does have push to continue, it does have Furigana, it does have voice acting, but there are some scenes that you can't press pause. So that does make it unfortunately not an S tier game, but there are also some replayable scenes, which is also amazing. So it's definitely on a similar level here as Kimetsu no Yaiba. Really, really good, but there is some flaws. Very polished, very pretty to look at, nice to listen to, really interesting for a language learner. But it doesn't have Furigana in the menus. This is a tough one again. I want to put it up in A+. It has voice acting. There are parts that are pushed to continue. It's really, really good. But to say it's better than Yokai Watch games and easier, I can't do that. There's Furigana everywhere. Man, this is tough. Maybe an A tier game here, but then can I say it's better than Mario and Luigi for beginners? No, I can't say that. Oh man, I think actually, you know what? I think the whole Mario Luigi series needs to be put up. It's too good, and it's really conflicting with my other games in the list. The fact is, it really is as good as the Yokai Watch games in terms of everything that you get. It's also easier language. I just feel like they need to be up there. Whereas here, Spy Family, yeah, it's probably easier than these games, but it is also similar to these games where they're really good, but there are some serious flaws. Whereas A+ is just like amazing. So yeah, Spy Family gets an A tier. It has some flaws. It's not full Furigana. There isn't Furigana absolutely everywhere. And I think we should keep A+ to being Furigana everywhere. So it's a great game, a cute game, reasonably accessible with a decent amount of story and voice acting. But some downsides where you can't pause all of the cutscenes. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. I really do think Mario and Luigi should be up there. Great games. Okay, next we have, oh my god, oh no. This is enormous. Here we have the Yugioh games, and there are so many. So just very, very quickly, these Yugioh games have push to continue and Furigana, and they even have Furigana for the cards, so you can read the Yugioh cards with Furigana to actually help you play. There's pretty much Furigana everywhere. There's story and stuff with the Furigana, with the dialogue and everything, and sometimes there's even voice acting for the actual battles. It's not like a story or anything with the voice acting, but it's just like I'll set my card. You've activated my trap card. That kind of stuff, right? Just that's voice acted, so it's a little bit of listening practice as you're actually dueling people. If you're a Yu-Gi-Oh fan and you want to learn Japanese, you're in luck. They're great games for learners of Japanese if you're interested in the game. And you're also in luck for choice, because at the A tier, there's other games in different tiers, but just in the A tier, there are 12 Yu-Gi-Oh games. So I'm gonna have to show you my spreadsheet here just to make it really clear. So we have Yu-Gi-Oh 5D Tag Force 1 to 6. So there's 6 games. They have Furigana, push to continue, but no voice acting. But they do have voice acting in the battles. These games are for the PlayStation Portable. We also have Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc V Tag Force Special that is also for the portable, and that is actually having some of the old classic characters in it. That one's a really good one. We also have for the PlayStation 2 Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters GX, same thing, Furigana push to continue. We have Yu-Gi-Oh! Legacy of the Duelist Link Evolution for the PlayStation 4, Nintendo Switch, and Steam, again, Furigana push to continue. We also have 2 games on the Switch, Yu-Gi-Oh! Rush Duel Saikyo and Yu-Gi-Oh! Rush Duel Dawn of the Battle Royale, which is actually, I think, an upgraded version of Rush Duel. Lots of Furigana, lots of character dialogue, really easy to get into the games, so easy to use for studying Japanese. Nintendo Switch, incredible. And there's even one on the Nintendo 3DS as well. And Yu-Gi-Oh! Rush Duel Dawn of the Battle Royale even has a demo, so you can check it out. No story voice acting, but a lot of Japanese to read and study with. And so these are definitely all A tier, full Furigana push to continue. I think though that I'm going to keep these ones as A tier rather than A+, just because It's really just Yu-Gi-Oh with a bunch of characters talking about Yu-Gi-Oh. If you're into it, it's great. It's really good. I don't know. I don't think it's quite on the same level as the A+ tiers, but they're really good games. In terms of language difficulty though, it's really tough to place because yeah, these ones are real life. It's going to be easier. This is real life. Snack World is starting to get into the fantasy. So I'd say it's probably somewhere in the middle because there is fantasy speech. There's all these kind of move names and stuff like that and crazy monsters. So it's definitely going to be tougher. I don't know if it's more tougher than Wild Arms or less tougher. It's probably a similar level. So let's just get all of those 12 games here on the list. And so I actually managed to kind of summarize them a little bit here. So we have Tag Force 5. This is representing all of the first 6 games. And then we have the rest here. So yeah, Yu-Gi-Oh are great games if you're wanting to learn Japanese and you like the Yu-Gi-Oh card game. So much to do. You could probably get to fluent in Japanese if you're a Yu-Gi-Oh fan just from playing Tag Force 1 all the way to Tag Force 6 and then all these other ones. That is so many thousands of hours of dialogue practice. That is ridiculous. Okay, let's see what we have next. Oh, okay, here we have the 3DS Zelda games. So these are really great games, lots of gameplay to enjoy, really cool worlds to explore, lots of people to talk with, push to continue, and Furigana. No voice acting or anything, but the whole game is pretty much Furigana. And so we have A Link Between Worlds, Ocarina of Time, and Majora's Mask. And I'm gonna have to put these games in the A tier, and in fact, probably just before the Yu-Gi-Oh games in terms of difficulty. It would be a little bit more challenging than these games language-wise, a little bit easier than these games language-wise. And so we have both Majora's Mask as well as Ocarina of Time. Where are you? There you are, Ocarina of Time. Incredible games, really accessible for language learners. The only thing kind of holding it back from being like as good as the A+ games is that there's quite a lot of sections where it's like dungeon heavy, a lot of gameplay, not so much talking, and a lot of the kind of conversations is really up to you, whether you go and talk with all the NPCs and stuff like that, whether you go and read everything and stuff like that. But there is a lot of language. They're really, really good, just because there is sometimes when you play for like 30 minutes or something and you're not seeing any dialogue because you're in a dungeon, makes me feel like these games are a little bit more like narrative focused. You know, it's difficult to say. Like A+, they're all crazy narrative focused. Even some of these other games in A have way much more narrative than Zelda, at least the ones on the 3DS. I originally had them actually a little bit lower, like A+, B-, but just looking at this list, I can't justify putting Zelda games that low. It's got to be better than those games. But then Dragon Quest IX, no, but the font and everything. No, I think A is a safe place to put them. They're really good learning experiences, very, very enjoyable. Furigana everywhere, very accessible. Great games for learning Japanese with. Yeah, I think it's definitely easier language-wise than the Yu-Gi-Oh games, just because there's so much like text in the Yu-Gi-Oh games. It's like difficult language, like setting cards and special effects and all that kind of stuff. Whereas the language in these games are a little bit more simple. All of them really great fun though, and all available on the Nintendo 3DS. Just one thing to be careful about though is Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask only have Furigana on the 3DS versions. That means if you play them on the Nintendo 64, or for that reason, Nintendo Switch Online Nintendo 64, there won't be any Furigana because it's the Nintendo 64 version, so you need to play the 3DS version if you want Furigana. Okay, we got a lot in the A tier, let's have a look. Oh my god, next we have Dragon Quest VIII, one of the greatest RPGs ever that have Furigana, even one of the greatest RPGs ever. Oh, love this game. Again though, this is a 3DS only game. You cannot play the PlayStation 2 version. There's no Furigana. There's also no voice acting, but this goes right to the S tier. Incredible. Just perfect experiences. Push to continue, Furigana, there's no cutscenes you have to worry about, voice acting as well. So this is the first game that is very heavily voice acted with push to continue for the most part, without any real flaws. Incredible. Amazing. Fantastic game. This is definitely an RPG that I can recommend if you want to sink your teeth into a big like 100-hour RPG, and it's going to be even longer if you're playing in Japanese. This could take a lot of your time and really help you get used to actually playing RPGs in Japanese with all of the language that you need to learn. Incredible experience, highly recommended. Even just thinking about it right now makes me want to play some. Fantastic game. I guess one thing you could say is that it doesn't have full furigana in the menus because it's on the 3DS, it's hard to do that, but most of it is written in hiragana with only just the simple kanji that are repeated over and over, so it's really not that big of a flaw. I guess I can put it down to S- if I want to be really picky, but I want to put it as S tier because it's just a fantastic game. And there's even a Japanese script that you can read along with to help you learn Japanese with, so you can just highlight it over with Yomi-chan or something, or nowadays Yomi-tan. That's in the link in the description or on the Game Go website. I have the whole database there. So very, 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 very good game for learning Japanese with. All right, what do we have next? Okay, now we have Zelda Breath of the Wild. So, as I said, I needed to put this separately from Tears of the Kingdom. And the reason why is I feel like Tears of the Kingdom really improve a lot on where Breath of the Wild kind of had some shortcomings for a language learner. However, the same problems exist for Tears of the Kingdom, just without those improvements. So the thing is that Tears of the Kingdom does have a log, even if it's hard to get to, and it does have a lot more NPCs to talk to around the world, but Breath of the Wild really focused on the wild. It really focused on the world itself, and that means there's not as much dialogue, not as many NPCs to talk to, not as much Japanese to actually learn, and this game is really tough because you can end up spending hours like not seeing any Japanese dialogue that has furigana on it, because most of what you're dealing with, the menus and the items, all have kanji, not furigana. And so for that reason, this game needs to get a big demotion down to the B+ tier. I really wouldn't recommend it. I wouldn't say this is an amazing game for learning. Just like these games, they're decent, but there are some flaws that really stop it from being excellent for learning Japanese with. And personally, I don't really recommend it. If you want to play this type of Zelda, which is a bit more open world, you should play Tears of the Kingdom. There's more NPCs to talk to. There's more Japanese to learn. Breath of the Wild, however, you could go hours without seeing any Japanese at all, at least with furigana. Okay, next we have, Fantasy Life. This is cool. So here we have Fantasy Life Link for the Nintendo 3DS, as well as Fantasy Life I that hasn't been released yet for the Nintendo Switch. You have this fantasy world that you live in, you can explore, level up. Perfect game for introducing you into the RPG world because it has furigana on absolutely everything, all of the menus, all of the items, everything. So you get to learn fantasies, things like swords and magic and kings and castles, but all with furigana. It has a little bit of action to enjoy, but heaps of NPCs to talk to, story, dialogue, fun stuff, very good. So both Fantasy Life Link we'll put here, I would say above Snack World, right next to Snack World in terms of difficulty. And we have the unreleased Fantasy Life I. Now, because it's unreleased, just be a little bit cautious about the actual tier placement. I don't know if it has voice acting yet. If it does have voice acting, it could actually go all the way up to the S tier. I don't know if Level 5 is planning on putting voice acting in Fantasy Life I. If they did, it would be amazing. But right now, as of all of the trailers, it's exactly the same as Fantasy Life Link, just for the Nintendo Switch and expanded and all that kind of stuff. Really interesting, accessible entries into the world of RPGs, so definitely check it out if it's something that interests you. Okay, we're making some progress. What do we have next? Oh, Pikmin 3. So Pikmin 3 and 4 definitely go into the B+. I think they're really interesting entries here in the tier list. Full furigana, push to continue, interesting gameplay. I just think there's not quite enough dialogue to really put it into the A tier. I'd say it's like borderline A-, like same with Girls Mode 3, they're like borderline, you could almost replace them, but but I feel like it does need to be a little bit below because there are some moments where you don't get much dialogue and there are moments where you can't actually pause the dialogue, it just kind of happens. Not too often, but there are moments. It's not so much a language-focused game, more a gameplay-focused game, so that's why it's here in the B+. So Pikmin 3 and 4 go in the B+ for push to continue and furigana. Actually, I'd like to make just a very quick correction. I actually think Pikmin 4 deserves to be in the A- tier, not the B+. It actually has a lot more dialogue than all of the other Pikmin games. There's furigana everywhere. The game has a much bigger story mode with furigana in the menus you can read about things. It even has a log. So if you're wanting to play a Pikmin game that has furigana, Pikmin 4 is definitely the game to go for. Next up, we have Yokai Watch 1 for the Nintendo Switch. Ooh, this is a good one. So as I mentioned before, there was Yokai Watch 1 for the Nintendo 3DS, and we can see that that here is ranked in the A+. However, the one fault that the 3DS games have is that you can't pause the cutscenes, or that you can, but it blocks the text. not Yokai Watch 1 on the Nintendo Switch, and for that reason, it very safely goes into the S tier, and I would say it's easier than Dragon Quest VIII. Fantastic game for learning Japanese, just a wonderful game. Set in Japan, beautiful environments, you kind of get that real immersion, lots of Japanese culture. There are some difficult parts, right, with the slang and stuff, but it's also really interesting. There is voice acting, there are cutscenes that you can pause as well, but it's not completely voice acted, but it's definitely an S tier game. Fantastic entry for learning Japanese with, I have to put it in the highly recommended here in the S tier. Actually, I think after some further contemplation, Dragon Quest VIII needs to be an S- because there is technically a fault. It's a tiny fault, but I put Crayon Shinchan down for a tiny fault as well. So I think it needs to be down in the S-. It is perfect, it's just a tiny little thing. It's like 5 kanji in the menu don't have Furigana. It's not a big deal, but it is there because Yokai Watch is perfect, everything is accessible, so it needs to be up there in its separate rank. Okay, looking pretty good. Let's have a look what's next. Okay, we have Hero Bank. This is another game that I actually never heard of before, but I discovered it for when I was searching tens of thousands of games. I found this Hero Bank for the Nintendo 3DS. And so here we actually have 2 games in the series, Hero Bank 1 and Hero Bank 2, and they're full push to continue, Furigana, no voice actor or anything, but they're almost level 5-ish quality in terms of like overall presentation. And it even has like full Furigana in the menus as well. So for that reason, Hero Bank, I need to put in the A tier for certain. And look, full Furigana would be A+, but I just don't think they're that they're not quite as iconic as the A tiers, right? I don't recommend them quite as much as the A+ tiers, sorry. So I think it should be in the A tier. These games are set in real life Japan in school and stuff, so they have pretty approachable language. I would say it's somewhat similar to Girls RPG, maybe a bit easier, maybe a bit more difficult, but it's somewhere around there. It's very much set in kind of like real Japan. But because there is a bit more like RPG elements, I think we should probably put it below, or more difficult in terms of the language difficulty. Now there's also Hero Bank 2 somewhere. Let's have a look. Where is it? There it is, Hero Bank 2 down there. So Hero Bank 1 and Hero Bank 2, definitely A tier because they are full push to continue with Furigana, plenty of story, quite visually pleasing. Not quite as good as level 5, but we definitely see it's kind of inspired by the design. And Furigana everywhere, so definitely very useful for a language learner. Okay, next up we have, oh my god, the Mystery Dungeon Pokemon games. These are incredible, so good for Japanese language learners, so good. So here we have 2 games for the Nintendo 3DS. We have Pokemon Super Mystery Dungeon and Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Gates to Infinity, and then we have Pokemon Mystery Dungeon DX for the Nintendo Switch. These games are incredible. In fact, they're probably the best Pokemon games for learning Japanese with in terms of like accessibility and language, overall language difficulty and stuff like that. Furigana absolutely everywhere. Everything has Furigana, the menus, the information, the tutorials, the Pokemon talking, really cute, basic dialogue, very easy to read. Also some introduction to some RPG elements and stuff like that. Just incredible stuff. Really cute, happy, fun times. Great music. Overall, really recommended. For that reason, I need to put them pretty similar to Mario RPG. I do think they have perhaps like maybe slightly less language than Mario RPG, but they're really in like the same kind of vein as all of these Yokai Watch games and everything. So in terms of like which one is easier, I'd probably say Pokemon Mysterious Dungeon has easier Japanese than Yokai Watch just because of some of the like, you know, monster stuff and slang. But there is also a bunch of RPG language as well, but man, the A+ tier, what a great tier. So many great games here. Unfortunately, just kept out of S tier without voice acting and stuff like that, but fantastic. Pokemon Mystery Dungeon series is so good. So let's get Super and let's put that here as well. And then let's get the other one and put that there as well. Great. Man, I really love the look of the A+ tier. What a fantastic tier. So if you're looking for a really comfy, cute time with some Pokemon characters, highly recommend Pokemon Mystery or Mysterious Dungeon for both the 3DS and the Switch. All of them are fantastic. Furigana with push to continue with no language that's inaccessible for a language learner. You don't need OCR or anything, very easy to play. Okay, what do we have next? Oh, Blue Dragon. This is a really tough one for me. Blue Dragon was on the Xbox 360, and I myself never really got into Xbox, so it's very difficult to give a 100% accurate opinion of this game. But I have done a bunch of research, looked at hours of footage of Blue Dragon to kind of get the best feel that I can for the game. So Blue Dragon's a really interesting entry. It's actually a project made from the creator of Dragon Ball as well as the creator of Final Fantasy, and they worked together on this game on the Xbox. Why the Xbox? It has Furigana voice acting and push to continue, so it should be a really high rank. So I'm definitely having to put it somewhere in the A rank. However, I'm not sure whether or not it has pausable cutscenes. So that's a really determining factor whether or not it is A or A minus, and I'm just not sure. So just so you know, it does have Furigana, it does have push to continue in many of the sections of the game, and it does have a lot of voice acting. So it should be an A tier game. If it doesn't have pausable cutscenes, I would have to put it down to A minus, but I think for now, I should probably leave it in the A tier. So perhaps a little bit easier than Wild Arms because it is, you know, a bit more friendly, but perhaps not as easy as Fantasy Life and stuff like that. Next, we have a really weird one here. Here we have Sushi Striker, The Way of Sushido. So this is a really interesting game. It's a game set around sushi and a kind of samurai kind of ninja type guy. It does have Furigana, it does have push to continue, it has Japanese voice acting, and it does have some cutscenes. I'm not sure if it's pausable or not, so just be careful. It's definitely somewhere in the A tier. Honestly, if it did have pausable cutscenes, it could almost be an S tier game. It's a really tricky one because it does have a lot of voice acting, Furigana everywhere. Maybe not like as much story as some of these other ones in the A plus tier, but I'm just not certain about whether or not it has pausable cutscenes, and it's not necessarily as high a caliber of a game as the ones in the A tier. So I would like to keep it in the A tier. But for that reason, I will probably put it somewhere around Spy Family. It's pretty good for an A tier. I'd have to put it at the top of A tier. It's really, really, really good. The fact that it has voice acting, the fact that it has Furigana and push to continue, it should probably be higher, but I'm just going to keep it there in the A tier for now. And so Sushi Strikers, The Way of Sushido, here is available on the Nintendo 3DS and the Nintendo Switch. Next we have yet another level 5 game here. Level 5 is definitely the best company if you're interested in learning Japanese. They have so many games that have Furigana. Almost, I think every level 5 game has Furigana almost. Actually, I think there was like 1 or 2 games that didn't, but almost every other game has Furigana by level 5. Here we have a really cool entry. Level 5 actually partnered up with Gundam, or Gundam, however you pronounce it, and they made a level 5 style Gundam game. This game is absolutely incredible. This goes straight to the S tier. This is the best space game on the entire list. If you like space and you want to learn Japanese and you want a game with Furigana, this is the Gundam game for you. It has so much Gundam feel to it. I actually got quite invested in the story as I was playing through, probably more than any other game on this list other than the ones I've already played like No Kuni and stuff. This game really kind of hooked me. I was really interested in the story. It really feels like a Gundam game, but just with level 5 charm. Incredible. Push to continue, Furigana, pausable cutscenes, voice acting. It has it all. The only thing this game doesn't have is replayable audio, but you don't need it because you have the Furigana. It's perfect. Absolutely perfect for a Japanese language learner. Well deserving of the S tier. There's tons of story with a little bit of gameplay here and there to kind of separate the story. It's perfect. It's the perfect blend if you just want a story to invest in that's quite interesting, great music, very pretty, very accessible, but also with a little bit of gameplay. It's not just a visual novel. Really recommend this game. It's on the PSP, maybe a hard one to get, but fantastic for Japanese language learners. I hope they re-release this game at some stage on newer systems and stuff. It's incredible and does not deserve to be hidden away on the PlayStation Portable. Next up, even another incredible game. Oh my god, and yet another level 5. Love you, level 5. You guys are the best company in the world. Here we have a weird one in English. It's called Danball Senki, literally Cardboard Wars. In English, it's been translated as Little Battler's Experience. It is incredible. Another level 5 game, that seems to be produced around the same time as the Gundam AGE game was made. Very, very similar release window, perhaps even developed around the same time. And where the previous game was much more kind of Gundam theme, had a bit more of a Gundam, a little bit more of like a darker feel to it, this now leans a little bit more into the Yokai Watch, a little bit more into the true level 5 feel. Also a great Gundam game, also a great spacey type game, really cool, full Furigana, voice acting, push to continue, and pausable cutscenes, another S tier, incredible. And there's actually 2 games and 2 versions of those games. So the first releases was on the PSP, and then they were re-released on the 3DS with kind of better visuals and stuff. So I would recommend the 3DS version over the PSP version. And so the first game is Danball Senki Booster. Definitely an S tier, probably maybe a little bit easier here. This is a re-release of the one on the PSP, and then there's also Danball Senki Cho Custom. So W Super Custom. And these are very similar to Gundam, but like they're really a unique, interesting twist. So it's set in this world where there's these mini Gundam, these small little like toy Gundam, and kids can actually control them and fight them, but because they're kind of dangerous, the only way to make it legal was to fight in a cardboard box. And that's why they're called Cardboard Wars, because they're these Gundam that fight in cardboard boxes. So it's a little bit more kiddie, right, than the actual Gundam itself, which was in the previous game. But really cool, really interesting, you know, with the Furigana, the voice acting, the push continue, and the pausable cutscenes, it's perfect. Great for a language learner, really interesting. And these ones are actually on the 3DS, not just the PSP, so they're a little bit more accessible, maybe. You know, it's just a little bit more recent, but they're all really good and fantastic. Right now, level 5 is dominating the S tier. We have 4 level 5 games. Dragon Quest VIII is also a level 5 game, so we have 5 level 5 games right now in the S tier. Level 5, I love you. You guys are great. They've done so much for learners of Japanese. Seriously, just think about it. You'll see it by the end of this video. Level 5, God tier. I know we're not ranking game companies, but level 5 really should be up there. So, Danball Senki Cardboard Wars is definitely an S tier. Oh my god, and another level 5 game. Oh wow, what, have they all been kind of sorted? Hopefully it's truly random, or maybe there just really is so many level 5 games. Next we have Inazuma 11. This is now level 5's soccer game, and they also made a soccer anime and stuff, and very popular. Now there are 2 sets of Inazuma 11 games. There are the original 1, 2, and 3, which were released on the DS, and I'll be dealing with them separately. And then here we have the 3DS games, which is kind of a spin-off. This is Inazuma 11 GO. So there are 3 games in the series, and they are really good. So we have Inazuma 11 GO 1, 2, and 3 for the 3DS, and they have Furigana, push to continue, and even Japanese voice acting. Unfortunately, there is a negative though, and the cutscenes are unpausable, and so for that reason, they can't go in the S tier as much as I want them to be an S tier. Level 5, why? They made the same mistake as Yokai Watch. The pause button blocks the text, because they put the text on the smaller screen on the 3DS. Terrible idea, guys. What are you doing? But for that reason, and that reason alone, I have to put Inazuma 11 in the A+ tier instead of the S tier, even if it causes me great pain. And so there we go. Inazuma 11 GO 1, 2, and 3 here in the A+ tier. Really good experiences. I really want to put them in S tier, but unfortunately with the unpausable cutscenes, I just can't do it. Wonderful experiences, great story. It's set in real life, so it's a lot of usable language. Fun game as well with the soccer elements. Just really good. And there's even a new one coming out soon on the Switch, which is also on this list. Inazuma 11's a really interesting one. Something if you haven't checked out, you should probably check out if you're a language learner, because it's just usable, interesting language. Oh, and actually, by the way, level 5 also made Snack World. So level 5's crazy. Anyway, so much level 5 love in this video. I knew it was going to happen. There's just too many games, but Inazuma 11 is excellent. Definitely A+. It would be S tier if it wasn't for the unpausable cutscenes. Next, we have a weird one. This one really took me by surprise. Yet another game on the 3DS, and this is a Shinchan game that has full voice acting, Furigana, and push to continue. what the, but it's a platformer. Now it is a relatively shorter game being a platformer. Kind of imagine like if you were to play something like Donkey Kong, it's nowhere near as good as Donkey Kong, but just imagine that you're playing something like Donkey Kong. But then whenever you like finish a level, you have a little bit of voiced dialogue that you can take at your own pace, push to continue with Furigana. That's pretty amazing. It may not be the most amazing game, but it's pretty amazing that it actually exists and that it has the things that it has like Furigana. So I don't know where to put this, man. Like it could be A, right, next to Sushi Strikers because, right, it has the same deal. I feel like I have to put it like A-. Oh, can I justify B? I don't think I can justify B. B's unjustifiable. I can't justify B. Pause. I have some very important information. It is definitely justifiable to put it at a higher rank. Not only is there this game that actually deserves a promotion, a very big promotion, but there's actually 2 more games. And so the 2 other games have almost full voice acting, Furigana and push to continue, so they deserve to be at an A+, without a doubt. Incredibly accessible for a language learner. The first of the 2 games that is focused around space unfortunately has unpausable cutscenes, so that is one negative, keeping it out of the S tier. And then the other one, which is focused on movie stars, this one doesn't have too many cutscenes, but there are some unpausable events, and so I want to keep it out of the S tier, so A+. However, the main one that I was actually looking at in this video, the green one, Gekiatsu Oden Warudo Daikonran. This game is crazy. There's no flaws. Push to continue, Furigana voice acting, and I found out later, you can even replay every single scene in the game. You can rewind and go back to any point in the game. So while the games are quite silly, they're definitely the comedic relief games on this list. Very silly, very funny, a lot of butt jokes. Actually got me chuckling sometimes at some of the puns they made. Like Oshiri, the word for an acquaintance. Well, Oshiri can also mean butt, and I can be to come together, so it's like for your butts to come together as an acquaintance. Very silly stuff. And look, it may not have like the biggest narrative, but if you're looking for a fun little game that's going to keep you smiling and then have some fun platformer and then be able to learn a bunch of Japanese as you go with a bunch of reading practice, it definitely deserves to be in the S tier. I will keep it in the S-, however, and just be aware that it's more of a lighthearted game, not like a really big story to take lots and lots of dialogue. But there is a lot of voice acting in this game. It's very impressive. Okay, I feel like we must be getting close to halfway. Wow, what a huge video. 150 games trying to cram into the top 100. Incredible. The next game we have is, the Layton game for the Nintendo Switch, but instead of Layton, they replaced the character with, I believe, his daughter. A very interesting game indeed. Layton's Mystery Journey is available on the Nintendo Switch and the 3DS, and I believe even on iPhone as well. And this has to be an S tier game. But it does have some flaws, so it's down in S-. In terms of overall difficulty, it's got to be somewhere around here. So incredible game for a language learner. You have push to continue Furigana voice acting, and you even have pausable cutscenes. But some cutscenes you can't pause, and because it has a flaw, it needs to be S- rather than S. But it is incredibly good for a Japanese language learner. You have to kind of like solve puzzles, you use your Japanese knowledge, you kind of interact with Japanese. It's just a really pleasant, lovely, lovely game. And could you guess who made it? Of course, Level 5. Level 5 is the creator of the Layton series, as well as No Kuni and all that kind of stuff. Level 5, I love you guys. Seriously, I think I'm going to say it every 5 seconds, but here we have Layton's Mystery Journey as an S-. Great game, check it out. It's on the Switch. A fantastic game for Japanese language learners. So close to absolute perfection. Just these tiny minor flaws. Okay, next up, we're just punching it out of the park with the S tiers. We have Famicom Detective, or Famicom Tante. This right here is perfection. It's just perfection in all of the sense of the word. It is an S+ game. Incredible. Perhaps the best game in this entire list. Sorry, spoilers. Incredible. This is for number 1 and number 2. Not number 3, which was recently released. Number 3 does not have Furigana. It still has all of the benefits of number 1 and number 2, but not with Furigana. So Famicom Detective is a visual novel game where you're a detective. You have to investigate scenes, look around, search the area in the room. It has Furigana, push to continue, voice acting, log, replayable audio, and no cutscenes you need to worry about pausing. Completely perfect for a Japanese language learner. Not only that, the whole game is 100% voice acted. 100% voice acted. This may be the only game in this entire list that is 100% voice acted. Oh, I think there's another one actually, but it's a really good experience. What an amazing game. It is a little bit challenging because it's like a murder mystery type thing, but amazing, right? I don't know if there'll ever be a game better than this. It is incredible because it has Furigana, a log, all of that. It's amazing. The story is better in the third one actually. It's like the story's not bad, but the story is pretty good in the third one, but it's still totally interesting to play. And I really like how you can, because you're actually a detective, it's not just a boring visual novel, and even the imagery is quite nice. You have to look around and investigate areas, but you also can think about things. So every single time you like look at something, you can then think about what you just looked at, and you get more dialogue that you get to hear and listen and read along with. That's another incredible thing about this game is you can read along with it. It doesn't matter how good your kanji is, because there's Furigana and it's fully voice acted, you can read as it appears. You can read it almost at the same speed as the actual speaker themselves if you can read hiragana fast. So it's just incredible. It has to be S+. I love this game so much. It's a bit of a shame that the third one doesn't have Furigana, but honestly, if you play the first one and the second one, you're probably ready to play the third one without Furigana. So incredible experiences, highly super recommended, fantastic games for learning Japanese with. Famicom Detective Club or Famicom Tante. And surprisingly not made by level 5. Okay, wow, even just this list already could just be great to stop at, but we have so many more games. Oh, and we have another level 5 game. We have Decapolice. This is a game that hasn't yet been released, but it looks incredible. Incredible. This could potentially be another S+ game, but we just don't have enough information on it. It is definitely an S game as of for what we've seen, but we just don't know if it's an S+, or we don't know if it's an S actually, because it does have Furigana, it does have voice acting, it does have push to continue, and there's a chance it may even have a log button. So there is so much potential in this game. I just don't know whether the cutscenes are pausable or not, and I don't know if the entire thing is Furigana, but from the looks of things it is, but there are some trailers where it doesn't have Furigana, some that do, so I'm a bit concerned, but this could be an S tier game. I wanted to include it in this list even though it's not released yet because it looks incredible and it's just on the horizon. Level 5 is about to announce a whole bunch of games. Love you, Level 5. So really looking forward to this game. Hopefully it's as good as it appears. Next up, we have another S tier game, Digimon Adventure. Digimon Adventure being S tier? What? This is a game for the PSP, another game with Furigana. It has Furigana, push to continue, almost full voice acting, and no cutscenes you really need to worry about. It's perfect. Fantastic for a language learner. Really surprising. This is actually a proper Digimon game where you actually kind of explore a world and level up your Digimon and stuff. And it's actually also really good for language learners. So if you like Digimon, this is the best Digimon game to learn with because of how accessible it is for a language learner. And it even has the classic characters from the original anime. I would say in terms of overall difficulty, it's probably a little bit easier than Danball Senki, but a little bit harder than Yokai Watch, perhaps. It could be easier actually, because Yokai Watch does have some monster stuff, but that's probably a good place to keep it. Okay, so day 2 of recording. This is a very big video. Next, we have Digimon World Redigitize Decode. So this game is available for the PlayStation Portable as well as the 3DS. This game has Furigana and push to continue, so it's definitely in the B tier. And it also has a little bit of voice acting, with lots of story and gameplay to have. So this would definitely be like an A- game, I would say. It's not quite as good as the games in the A tier. It's very decent, it's pretty good. Unfortunately though, the Furigana isn't in the menus. Now in terms of difficulty, it's gotta be somewhere around here. Dragon Quest IX does have a bit more like fantasy speech, but this has a lot more like text speech as well as fantasy speech. It could be more difficult, it could be easier. I'm gonna make it more difficult, but it's definitely here in the A-. It's definitely better than the B tier, but not good enough to be in the ranks of all the other A tier games. Okay, and so next up we have, the Professor Layton games for the Nintendo 3DS. My God. So there are 3 games for this ranking. We have Professor Layton and the Azrand Legacy, as well as the Miracle Mask. And then we have Layton versus Ace Attorney. Now these games are absolutely incredible. They could almost be an S tier. They really could. Almost. They have beautiful cutscenes, really interesting, voice acted at times, full furigana, push to continue. They're really interactive because you actually need to investigate what's going on. You need to actually use your Japanese comprehension to actually progress through the story. But unfortunately, there is one downside, so they cannot be in the S tier, and that is the cutscenes aren't pausable. Why? Because it's the DS, unfortunately, when you pause the cutscenes, it blocks the text on the screen. This is a really common problem for the 3DS, unfortunately. So these, unfortunately, go down into the A tier, and I would say they're probably, yeah, they're around here. They're harder than the Yokai Watch games language-wise, that's for sure, but they're also easier than Kimetsu no Yaiba. These games definitely deserve to be an A+ tier. They're really, really good for learning Japanese with. They're so accessible. It's just unfortunate you can't pause the cutscenes. So you'll unfortunately have to use the cutscenes as kind of like a little bit of listening practice, maybe a little bit of reading practice, but not really learning through the cutscenes. Okay, next up we have Okami. Nice! This game is a classic. So this game actually came out on the PS2, but it's since then been re-released many times in HD. It's pretty much been released on everything: PlayStation 2, Wii, PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, Xbox, Nintendo Switch, Steam. This is an incredibly accessible game. Now, this is a really cool one. So this game is very Japanese vibe, and that's more why this game has furigana. It uses quite difficult old language. So this game is very difficult as far as the actual language goes, but it's an incredible game. It's almost like Zelda, like you explore around this beautiful world set in this kind of calligraphy Japanese theme. Very, very cool. It's actually based around a lot of Japanese mythology. Really, really cool entry. So this game needs to be similar to Zelda games because it is quite similar, although I will say this has a lot more story. It has furigana as well as push to continue, and it doesn't really have too many cutscenes. This is a really tricky one. I could almost put it in the A+ tier, really, almost. It has full furigana everywhere, the whole story, the menus, the items, everything. It is definitely going to be the most difficult game in the A+, or even if it was just going to be in the A, very, very difficult. Man, you know what? I think I'm actually going to put it up in the A+ tier. I was going to put it in the A tier, but thinking about it more, the other games in the A tier, it is better than those. It definitely is. It really is a full-fledged game, full-fledged experience. It's incredible. It's so unique, full furigana. It doesn't have any voice acting, so that's unfortunate, but neither do a lot of the other games in the A+ tier, but it is completely accessible for a language learner. It's just definitely going to be on the hard end of things because it's quite older Japanese as well as very thematically kind of mythological and all that kind of RPG type stuff. So it's definitely going to be the most difficult one in the A+ tier. An incredible game though, very, very fun, highly recommended just for the game itself. However, just be aware that if you try playing in Japanese, it does have some quite difficult language, as you can probably see on the screen here. This is definitely not a game for complete beginners, but perhaps if you're a bit more of an advanced Japanese student, but you want a game that's a perfect introduction to a bit more archaic Japanese, a bit more difficult Japanese, a bit more older Japanese, a bit more mythological Japanese, this is the best game to get introduced to that genre. Oh man, what a game next. This is another game that I'd never come across before doing this research. We have the Gaist Crusher series. There are Gaist Crusher 1 and Gaist Crusher 2, or Gaist Crusher God. Absolutely insane for a Japanese language learner. These games have furigana, push to continue, so much voice acting, and a very unique thing that is not really in any other game. It has a rewind button. What the? So you can actually press the rewind button, and throughout the certain like level, for example, you're on, you'll actually see a progress bar as you progress through the stage, the story. All of that is rewindable and fast forwardable, so you can actually go forwards and backwards and replay as much as you want. It does have a lot of this visual novel style conversation, a lot of it is voiced, and there is also some action moments, so you can get a bit of break from all of the learning and all of the reading, all the dialogue. So I have to put both of these games in the S tier. They're incredible. Like, they could almost be S+. The only downside, and it's a very small downside, is sometimes there are cutscenes, but they're not very long cutscenes, but unfortunately these cutscenes don't even have any text. So not just furigana, they don't have any text at all, and you can't push to continue, and even if you could, it wouldn't help because there's no text. So they're very, very rare cutscenes though, not enough to demote it from the S tier. I could put it down in the S-, but the fact that it has replayable audio, you can just rewind, possibly even rewinding and playing back the cutscene, this game has to be an S tier. It has to be. So both this one as well as Gaist Crusher God have got to be at the S tier. Incredible. Furigana push to continue, voice acting, and rewindable, replayable scenes. Incredible. Actually, I just checked and you can actually replay the cutscenes just by rewinding. Incredible. Definitely S tier. In terms of difficulty though, it's tough. The language isn't actually that difficult. I had a look. A lot of the language used was like N5, N4. It really wasn't that difficult. Decapolice definitely has to be more difficult, and I'd say the Gundam games also have to be a bit more difficult. So perhaps they could be somewhere here a bit easier than Gundam. That's tough actually. Maybe Yokai Watch is actually harder than these games because Yokai Watch does have quite a bit of like slang and like monster language. So I don't know if I could put that as the easiest game on the S tier. No, I couldn't. Gaist Crusher definitely has more simple language after going through footage, so I would say these games are very similar in level. Maybe Digimon Adventure could even be harder. It's tricky. These games are very similar in terms of difficulty. Yokai Watch, I would say, is just a little bit more difficult because there is some slang and stuff you're not really going to learn in any textbooks. You're going to be like, what the hell is this? And then these games are a little bit more techie, definitely a bit more difficult. Still pretty approachable, but still a bit difficult language-wise. Okay, what do we have next? Oh my god, this is another game that I was introduced by doing all this research. Here we have Junisai. There are 2 games in this series and they're all based around a 12-year-old girl's romance at school. And so as you might imagine, these games are quite popular for young girls because they kind of are really relatable stories, the experience of going to school, having crushes on boys and stuff like that. Going to school every day, it has a lot of everyday life language, but it kind of goes through the troubles they face at school with romance and maybe their crush getting stolen by someone else and stuff like that. And so there are 2 games in the series for the Nintendo 3DS, Honto no Kimochi and Koi Suru Diary. And they're pretty much exactly the same. Furigana, push to continue, voice acting, replayable audio with a log. So you can already tell these are going to be S tier games, absolutely. The only difference though, and I would actually say these are probably the easiest in terms of language, the only difference between Honto no Kimochi and Koi Suru Diary is completely voice acted, whereas Honto no Kimochi is mostly voice acted. So incredible, another completely voice acted game, and it's probably the easiest game. This may end up taking first place in terms of both ease as well as accessibility for language learners. These games are practically flawless as far as for learning Japanese with. That being said though, they are aimed at a bit more of a younger audience, so they might not click with everyone, but incredibly good games for learning Japanese with if this is something that suits you. These games on the 3DS have it all. Furigana, push to continue, voice acting, log with replayable audio. It's actually overkill, it's so good. Okay, let's have a look at what we have next. So here we have the Naruto games, or the Naruto games, for the PlayStation 2. And these are actually really good for learning Japanese with. If you're a fan of Naruto, you are in luck. These games are incredible for learning Japanese. These games have push to continue, Furigana, full voice acted in most of the games. Very accessible. In fact, I could almost put these games as S tier, but unfortunately a common trend is that they don't have pausable cutscenes. Most of the game is actually push to continue, and it's mostly fully voice acted with Furigana. Incredibly good, but it does have flaws. There are some cutscenes that you can't pause. Now, these Naruto games, there are 4 really good ones on the PlayStation 2. There are some other games as well that didn't make it onto this list, but there are 4 really good ones. First, we have Naruto Ultimate Ninja 2 and 3, or Naruto Narutimate Hero 2 and Hero 3. And then we have Narutimate Excel 1 and 2, or Narutimate Axel 1 and 2. Now these 4 games do have their differences very slightly, as the way they approach the game is slightly different, but they do all end up at the same tier, because they have all of the benefits that I mentioned. So very quickly, let's go through Ultimate Ninja 2. Now, I just want to make it really clear, these are the games for the PlayStation 2, not the Ultimate Storm games that were re-released. These are different games. So Ultimate Ninja 2 is actually one of my favorite ones out of the 4 because it actually has adjustable audio settings, so you can actually change whether the BGM or the sound effects are higher or lower. So this is really good for a language learner because you can make the voices louder and much easier to hear. The menus and everything have full Furigana, and you get to relive all of the classic moments from the Naruto series. So as you can see, it starts off with a short cutscene that you can't pause, they're not too long, and then it goes into push to continue voice acting, and this is all fully Furigana, fully voice acted, fully push to continue. And this game is actually the first and perhaps one of the only fighting games that make it onto this tier list. So there is a little bit of combat that you get to have, and then a whole bunch of story, but this game also has an explorable world. So you can go around and talk to people, and often they'll have different lines of dialogue, so you can talk to them multiple times and get different dialogue, and it's all voice acted. Every NPC's voice acted. It's insane. The story mode in this game has about half of the story mode that's actually from the anime and the manga, and then the other half being a kind of extra added story that has some interesting character appearances that is quite fun. Ultimate Ninja 3 is a little bit different, where they do have the explorable world, but this time it's completely made up story. It's not the actual anime, but then there's a separate mode where you actually get to play through the highlight moments in the series. So you get to have a battle with a whole bunch of voice acting, push to continue, and they are also replayable. So Ultimate Ninja 3 is also incredibly good, just as good as Ultimate Ninja 2, just a little bit different in the way they approach the story. Next we have Narutimate Hero 1. This game also offers an explorable world with push to continue, voice acting and all that, as well as some additional story that didn't appear in the anime. And in this one, there's also the ability to replay some of the key moments from the actual anime and the manga, here with in-game graphics, voice acting, and Furigana. Now, you can also replay the hero mode cutscenes, so you can replay that. However, the only downside is, for these ones, you need to actually play the story mode to unlock the memory fragments, so you can actually view the pieces in hero mode to see the actual story. So there's kind of two stories going on at the same time concurrently. As you progress in the main story mode with the explorable world, you unlock parts of the actual anime and manga story that has some combat as well as even more voice acting, Furigana push to continue. You're really treated if you're a fan of Naruto. And then finally we have Narutimate XL2, and this game is probably the most polished. It has a full world that you can explore with voice acting. All of the characters, NPCs, they all have Furigana push to continue voice acting, multiple lines of dialogue, and this one actually progresses through the main story of Naruto following Gaara's rescue. It starts from that point. And there's also replayable cutscenes and stuff that you can get in the collection section. So again, incredibly good for learners. Voice acting, Furigana push to continue, just so good. So in terms of tier placement, these games have to be an A+. They just have to be. Like, full Furigana, they're even better than a lot of these games because they're also fully voice acted. In fact, they could be S tier, just they don't have those pausable cutscenes, a huge problem. However, in terms of overall language difficulty, I'm not sure. I actually think it would have to be easier than the Layton games. The Layton games can be a little bit tricky with some of the language, whereas Naruto doesn't really have that much tricky language, similar to Yokai Watch, really. Some of like the move names are a bit weird, but you don't really need to know the move names. You see what happens and that's all you really need to know. And then all of the story is pretty understandable. It's not too difficult in terms of the actual language. So I think all four of these games deserve to go in the A+ tier. However, that being said, just be aware that I did not mention the first game. That's a separate entry. But these four for the PS2 are definitely A+ games for learning Japanese with. Actually, there may even be some of my personal favorites in this list. Okay, next we have, oh my god, Megaton Musashi. Megaton Musashi is incredible. Such a good game. Again, another game made by Level 5. This game is a really cool action Gundam game for the Nintendo Switch. It has quite enjoyable Gundam battles, but also a whole lot of story, and this story is really good for a Japanese learner. The story has Furigana, push to continue, and almost full voice acting, and there are so many characters you get to talk to all throughout the world that you explore, and even the different times of day, the characters actually change. There's so much dialogue here. There is so much enjoyable reading practice. If you were to compare this to like a novel or something, there is just so much text to enjoy, so much voice acting, and it's quite nice to look at with cool music. Really cool entry. I would love to put this in the S tier, but unfortunately it does not have pausable cutscenes. As rare as they are, it does unfortunately get demoted to the A+. There are a lot of games in the A+, but this game is not perfect because of the fact that you can't pause the cutscenes. This game also has full Furigana in the menus and everything. It's just so good. So in terms of the language, it's a bit tricky. I would say the general dialogue is pretty easy, but there is a lot of kind of tech terms, especially in the kind of gameplay sections. So this definitely needs to be a bit trickier than these games. It's probably trickier than the Layton games. So perhaps just before you get into the kind of old school Japan style games, maybe it's just a little bit. It's kind of on a similar level to these three games where there is a little bit of technical language that's quite challenging, especially if you're a beginner. But if you're wanting to get into a bit more of like sci-fi games, this is a really, really good entry to get into sci-fi terms and stuff like that, because it has full Furigana everywhere, even on the menus. And again, level 5, oh my god. If I could get a tattoo of a game company, I think it would have to be level 5, because man, I love them so much. Such a great company for learning Japanese with. I so hope, please level 5, make just more and more games, a life full of amazing games from level 5. Please, I love you guys so much. Such an incredible company. This game is also released on the PlayStation 4, 5, and Steam, as well as the Nintendo Switch, and there's also a demo available, so if you want to check it out yourself, feel free to check it out. Whew, okay, we're getting the list quite complete now. Let's have a look at what the next one is. We have Super Mario RPG for the Nintendo Switch. This is actually a remake of the Super Nintendo game, and this is another really good RPG to get started with if you're looking for a first RPG to try and play in Japanese. Very approachable language, push to continue, and Furigana. There's no voice acting, however. It doesn't have full kanji though. It's actually really approachable for a beginner because it's somewhere in between a game that's full hiragana and a game that's starting to use kanji. It doesn't have kanji in everything, so this only uses kanji with Furigana for quite low level kanji. This could be a really good thing, but it could also be a difficult thing if you've ever tried playing an old Pokemon game all in hiragana. It can be quite challenging. For this reason, I'm not going to put it up as an A+, because full hiragana isn't necessarily as good as it sounds. It might be if that's what you're after specifically, but I think for the broad population of people learning, you're actually better off having kanji with Furigana than not having kanji at all. But a very accessible game, very fun, very cute, and a great first RPG for learners. Next, we have Ever Oasis. Now, this game is interesting. It's for the 3DS. It's not quite as like comparable to some of the other great RPGs here, but it's definitely a nice B+ game. It has push to continue and it has Furigana. Very, very cute, very approachable. It's just not necessarily like a classic like some of the other games. The story didn't really hook me. This is another game actually that doesn't have full kanji, so some of the more mid-level kanji, like for example Gambaru, doesn't actually have kanji. It's written only in hiragana, so I have to kind of put it down a little bit because I think that is actually more of a negative than it is a positive, but if it's something you're after, this could be really nice. The game itself didn't vibe with me too much. I think it has a nice place in the B+ range. There are some kanji in the menus that are missing Furigana. I don't really feel it's a complete A-tier game, but it's still a decent game for learning Japanese with. It's a very cute one, very accessible, and if this is something that interests you, Ever Oasis for the 3DS has Furigana. Oh, and what another incredible series. Now we have the Paper Mario series. So we had the Mario RPG series, now we have the Paper Mario series, and these are also incredible for people learning Japanese. Push to continue, Furigana, and very easy accessible language, and everything has Furigana, the menus, battles, everything. And so the Paper Mario RPG series is incredible for language learners. One thing though is that I'm kind of realizing now is that a lot of the kanji is only low-level kanji and it doesn't have kanji on everything, and I just downgraded a game for actually not having full kanji with Furigana, and I do agree, same thing with Super Mario RPG, it should actually demote it down to the A rank because it does actually make it harder for language learners, because now you have to look up the word and then see, is it this kanji or is it this kanji? Sometimes Japanese actually has the same sounds with two different words, so now you have to figure out which one it is. It just adds a bit more of a frustration for a language learner. Having kanji really helps it out. So for that reason, not only am I going to put the Paper Mario series in the A tier, even though I think they're incredible for language learners, incredibly good, they could even be A+, but I'm also actually going to demote the Mario RPG games to the A tier where I originally had them, because realistically the fact that it's not full kanji is actually a little bit difficult. It really is. If you try actually playing a game with a lot of hiragana, it is actually a bit of a challenge. Kanji is actually really helpful, and I think I had it right the first time. A tier is the right place for both the Mario and Luigi RPG series as well as the Paper Mario games. Just because they're a lower rank doesn't mean they're less recommended here for beginners or anything, because these are actually really beginner friendly, but just know that the fact of not having kanji will make it difficult sometimes for you. Kanji is really useful, especially when you have Furigana. So we have 2 Paper Mario games on the Nintendo Switch, Origami King and The Thousand Year Door. Both incredibly good games for beginners of Japanese, just be careful of the hiragana. We have Paper Mario Super Sticker for the Nintendo 3DS, and Paper Mario Color Splash for the Nintendo Wii U, all with Furigana and push to continue. So as you can see, there are a lot of games that are almost exactly the same for a language learner. Look at this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 Mario games that are very beginner friendly, but do have that problem with less kanji. But if that's something you're after, these are incredibly good first games to play. Okay, what do we have next? Oh, we have the other Professor Layton game. These are the Layton games for the Nintendo DS. Now these games have Furigana and push to continue, but unfortunately no pausable cutscenes or anything like that. So these definitely need to be in the A- tier because of the fact that the DS's font is actually quite difficult to read, and there's so many better Layton games to play. I just can't justify putting them in the same tier because the DS games are more difficult to play. Just like, for example, Dragon Quest IX here. So in terms of difficulty, it has to be somewhere here in the last 4. It's a little bit fantasy, it's a little bit tricky, so somewhere here. It is also full Furigana, so it's definitely probably easier than Dragon Quest Builders. Okay, next we have Super Mario Galaxy 1 and 2. Oh man, I love these games. So these games are for the Nintendo Wii, although Super Mario Galaxy 1 was actually kind of stealthily released on the Nintendo Switch if you got that kind of anniversary weird Mario pack that had 3 games in one and now they don't sell it or something. So confusing. But for the most part, they're only available on Wii, but you can get the one on Switch as well, just not Super Mario Galaxy 2. These games are incredible. I love them so much. I wish I could put them at a higher rank. They have Furigana and push to continue, making them very, very accessible platformers. The only real downside is there's just not that much dialogue. Like, it does have a story and that's quite good, and there are plenty of NPCs you can talk to and get a little bit of Japanese. So if you're looking at like a really light learning experience, you don't want too much text, but you want to kind of feel a bit accomplished for beating a game in Japanese, and there is Japanese here to read. You just kind of have to hunt and find it. You have to find the NPCs, find the signs, make sure to talk to everyone. You can actually get quite a bit of reading practice, not as much as the other games in this list, and that's why it's here at the B tier instead of the B+. But both of these games are incredible. I love them so much. Just turning them on instantly, I get much more happier, and like you kind of always look forward to meeting someone because it's like, oh, hello! I want to talk to you, Toad. It's like, what do you have to say? It's just so cute and charming. So I really, really enjoy these games. Okay, and next we have Bayonetta Origins. This game is a Nintendo Switch only, at least for the time of this release, and it's kind of like a prequel of the Bayonetta games, but it's really interesting and different. It's like this beautiful storybook game, really charming. It has Furigana, push to continue, voice acting. This game could almost be an S tier, but unfortunately you can't pause all of the cutscenes, and there are some moments as you're playing that you can't actually pause. And so maybe the characters might be talking to you and you can't pause those moments. And so unfortunately that stops this game from being an S tier as much as I want it to be, but it does deserve to be an A+ game. It's very, very enjoyable. There are just some moments that you can't learn it 100%. I would say the overall difficulty could be somewhere around here, perhaps. It's definitely not on the first line of ease. It's definitely on the second line of difficulty. These games all have a little bit more genre-specific language and things like that. Let's put it here above Megaton Musashi, for example. Oh, actually, Megaton Musashi has lots of real life type stuff, so let's put it after Megaton Musashi. An incredible game. I was actually really having a really fun time with it, playing it, and there is actually a demo available, so you can check it out yourself right now. It's so charming, and it just came out of nowhere. Like, who was expecting a Bayonetta game made in this way? It's just, what? And for it to have full Furigana and the beautiful storybook and everything, so cool. Just a shame about the unpausable cutscenes. Okay, next up we have Chocobo Dungeon. Now, this is only the Nintendo Wii version, not the remastered versions. Unfortunately, they removed the Furigana in the re-releases, so that's huge unfortunate. This is only for the Nintendo Wii version, but Chocobo Dungeon for the Nintendo Wii actually has Furigana, push to continue, and voice acting. It even has Furigana in the menus and probably one of the best soundtracks in this entire list. An incredibly good soundtrack, especially if you're a big fan of Final Fantasy. It is on the more gameplay heavy side though, so I'm not sure if I could put it in the A tier. Like, there is a narrative, there is a story, but if you compare to some of the A- games, it's definitely a lot less story than those. So for that reason, I need to put it in the B tier. It also doesn't have pausable cutscenes. Now, difficulty-wise is tricky. I think like Crayon Shinchan's probably the easiest, and maybe the Pet Shop game is probably easier. This could be a decent placement, although I feel like the Harvest Moon games are probably easier than Pikmin, so, and maybe Ever Oasis is a little bit more difficult because there is some fantasy stuff in there. So probably a decent order here of the difficulty of the B+ games. If you want a great soundtrack, some cute Chocobo adorableness, as well as Furigana, push to continue, and voice acting, Chocobo's Dungeon on the Wii is a great game. Ooh, next we have a really interesting one, Crimson Shroud. This is kind of almost like a darker fantasy tabletop RPG type one where you roll the dice and stuff. This is actually made by Level 5, as well as Yasumi Matsuno, who worked on Final Fantasy XII, Final Fantasy Tactics, and even Vagrant Story, as well as the Ogre Battle games. So this is an interesting game. It's just Furigana and push to continue, and it's almost like a novel. Like, there's quite a lot of text that's on the screen. It is a bit of an acquired taste. Like, it's a bit of an odd game, but it's a really unique one, and especially if you're wanting to get into more like fantasy language, a little bit more of like a tactics, triangle strategy type genre, this is a really interesting first game to get introduced to some of the language. I'm gonna have to put this game at the B+, however, perhaps a little bit more difficult than Wild Arms, perhaps, because this game does have Furigana and push to continue, no voice actor or anything, but unfortunately there's not Furigana in everything, doesn't have full Furigana, and it is a bit more gameplay heavy, but there is quite a bit of story as well. A really interesting entry and actually one of the more mature games on this list. Next we have Dragon Quest X Offline Edition, and oh man, I had so much hope for this game to make it to the S tier. It was so close. This game has Furigana, push to continue, a whole bunch of voice acting. It's a huge RPG, because it's actually the offline version of the online game, but redone in this kind of cute art style and kind of summarized all together. It could have been an S tier. It really could have. But there are two downsides. This game doesn't have Furigana in the menus, and it doesn't have pausable cutscenes. It does have a log that you can actually read without replayable audio, but unfortunately the log is only like the last 10 or 20 lines. So if it was a really long cutscene and then a battle, you're gonna miss out rereading some of the lines because it just gets deleted after 20 or so lines, which is a really unfortunate oversight. Why would you add such a limit onto the log? That could have put it at the S tier, but unfortunately that does make it a little bit flawed, so it needs to be here at the A+ tier. In terms of overall difficulty, I would say it's probably a little bit, maybe just a little bit easier than Okami, maybe a little bit more difficult than Kimetsu no Yaiba. It's hard to say. That game's quite dialogue heavy, whereas Dragon Quest X has so much language in all kinds of ways. There's a bit more older language, there's kings talking to people, demons and gods and stuff. It's like a bit more of like a fantasy game, so there is going to be a bit more challenging language, but it's a really good one. It could have been S tier. There's something about like the music when you play the game, you just feel at home, you feel comfy. Dragon Quest games really are great, especially the recent ones. Dragon Quest VII, 8, 9, 10, and 11, all incredible games for learning Japanese with. Here, Dragon Quest X Offline being in the A+ tier. Okay, we're down to the final 4 lines. Oh my god, there's still so many games to go through. Next, we have Golden Sun. This game is for the Nintendo DS, Golden Sun Dark Dawn, and for that reason, this game does need to be in the kind of A- region because of the fact that it is a DS game. The font can be a little bit difficult to read. I would say in overall terms of difficulty, this is probably a decent placement. It's somewhere here in between Dragon Quest Builders 2 and Dragon Quest 9. Also, this game does have cutscenes that unfortunately you can't take at your own pace. The menus are completely written in hiragana, so even with the kind of reduced resolution, you can still read the menus. Overall, a pretty decent game and a nice one to have Golden Sun here on the tier list. Another thing I feel is worth mentioning about Golden Sun on the DS is that there is actually the option to turn off the Furigana, and then you can have it just like the Zelda games where you press the actual kanji to have the reading show up. And so that's pretty cool, you can have the option. This game is really text heavy though. I mean super duper crazy text heavy. It took me like 20 minutes to even get into the game. The intro, just the intro alone, which is completely unpausable, not voice acted, just scrolling text, was like 6 minutes long. It's so much text. The intro was very long and boring, unfortunately, I've got to say. A cool thing though it does have is that actually there's a lot of terminology in the game because they're kind of based after some of the previous games. And so they actually have like an in-game dictionary where you can actually press some of the highlighted words and you can actually have a reading about that particular thing so you can learn about the world because it's so complicated. So there's just so much text in this game. All of the readings as well all have Furigana, so that's some nice reading practice if you want. And it is a turn-based RPG, so it's a fun game. It's just very text heavy. Next we have Denpa Ningen RPG free. This game is actually a free game that has a kind of stamina system, so you can only play a certain amount. It's kind of an RPG turn-based type thing. There is Furigana all over the place, not full Furigana. A lot of the menus and the battles don't have Furigana, but this game does have actually quite a lot of story, a lot of reading, not necessarily the most exciting story or anything, but this game on the Nintendo Switch does have Furigana, does have push to continue, and it even has voice acting in the kind of robot voice. Not necessarily my most recommended game, but this is definitely in the B+ range, and because it's kind of an RPG, I'd say it's perhaps a little bit easier than Wild Arms, a little bit more difficult than Pikmin, that type of range. It's free, so you can always check it out and see if this is something you want to use. Personally though, I would play something with a much more interesting story. That's the most important thing, is to actually play something you're really interested in, because that'll keep your motivation, keep playing. And that's another reason why I put this down into the B tier, because they're the ones I don't necessarily recommend quite as much, or they have some flaws that are making it cause to drop down here. And actually, after playing it for a little bit and thinking about it some more, I'd actually like to demote this down to the B-. It's got a pretty slimy free game system where when you die, you actually have to pay money if you want to kind of continue on. You have to kind of like go through these dungeons, and if you die, you lose all your items and everything, but you don't have to if you pay money. Now, it's not too bad, but you lose your progress, and it's pretty difficult actually. It just feels kind of, I wouldn't really recommend this game at all. Even in my previous analysis, I wasn't too positive, and looking at it some more, I'm really not too positive about it. And it doesn't have that much story unless you're going to progress more in the game, in which you need to actually pay to actually be able to do that, and it rubs me the wrong way. Okay, next we have, Professor Layton and the New World of Steam for the Nintendo Switch. Now, this game hasn't come out yet. This is another level 5 game, but this has the potential to be an S tier game. I cannot say it's an S tier game, but it has the potential right now, because we know that it has push to continue, Furigana, and voice acting. How much voice acting and whether or not the cutscenes are pausable or not will depend on whether or not it's an S tier or whether or not it's an A tier when it gets released. For now though, I believe it should probably be here with the rest of the Layton games here in the A+, because this is the evidence we have that those games don't allow you to pause the cutscenes, but the other Layton game on the Nintendo Switch does, so it could be S tier, right? We don't know. Unfortunately, this video was made before the game is released, so if it is amazing, yay! Congratulations, we've got another S tier game, but if not, it's still an incredible game because it has Furigana, push to continue, and voice acting. Very much looking forward for more level 5 games. Okay, next up we have Fairy Tail. Man, this one really blew me out of the water. This game is like this close from being the greatest game ever for learning Japanese with. It's so close. Fairy Tail has push to continue, it has Furigana, it has almost full voice acting, it has Furigana on everything, the menus, the battles, everywhere. Insanely accessible. It even has a log with replayable audio. Unfortunately, however, the cutscenes aren't pausable. Now, there aren't too many cutscenes, but there are some moments in the game where there's actually quite a bit of cutscenes, like for example, like near the end, for example. And so the game, I so badly want to put it in an S tier. It really is insanely good for a Japanese language. Insanely good for a Japanese language learner. I want to put it as an S-, but the fact that I know there are cutscenes you can't pause, S is supposed to be flawless, so unfortunately I have to put it in the A tier. Definitely the A plus, however. So in terms of difficulty, yeah, look, it's a fantasy game. Let's put it here, a little bit easier than Layton, a little bit more difficult than Naruto. It really is the same kind of thing as Naruto, right? You have a lot of dialogue, which isn't going to be too difficult, and then there's going to be some terminology that is going to be based on that actual game itself or that anime manga itself, and that might be a little bit challenging. And there may also be the occasional slang speech and stuff with a bit more eccentric characters, but for the most part, it's really accessible. But there are a lot of like monsters and magic and stuff. Incredibly good game to get introduced to RPG language. Almost everything would be covered in this game. It goes through like everything, all the magic and the spells and fire and all that kind of stuff, and all the monsters like dragons and everything. Insanely good. God, if only if it had pausable cutscenes, I could have put it in the S tier. Such a good game. Okay, next we have a kind of Yu-Gi-Oh attempt trying to be like Yu-Gi-Oh, but it's not Yu-Gi-Oh and it doesn't have quite as much charm. Here we have another card game that has Furigana and push to continue, and all the cards are readable with Furigana. This game is available on the Nintendo Switch as well as PlayStation 4 and 5. There's no voice acting or any cutscenes or anything like that you have to worry about, so it's completely accessible for a language learner. It's just like a lesser Yu-Gi-Oh! And for that reason, I can't put it at the same tier as Yu-Gi-Oh!, so it's an A-. It's still a good game for learning Japanese, but I just think if you're going to play this type of game, you might as well play Yu-Gi-Oh! Unless this, for example, interests you more, then great. In terms of overall difficulty, I would say the dialogue is kind of similar to Girls Mode. It's just a little bit more difficult. Girls Mode has a lot of shorter sentences. It does have some more trickier language, like similar to like Dragon Quest and stuff, where like the cards have a lot of kind of more fantasy information. So it's definitely a little bit more on the difficult side, but whether or not it's harder or more difficult than these games is really hard to say because it has a kind of lot of similar language. But I do feel like it's a bit more on the easier side, and it's really only the cards that have all of this harder language, not really the dialogue in the game, so it's probably easier than Dragon Quest Builders 2, but very similar to Layton. Okay, and the next game, we have Zelda the Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, and Skyward Sword. So these three games are very, very similar in terms of the language experience, so I'm going to be putting them as one entry. So these games have Furigana and push to continue. These three games offer huge explorable worlds, so many NPCs to talk to, full Furigana everywhere. Definitely incredible Zelda games for learning Japanese with because they're just such a good balance of gameplay, fun, as well as language to study. I personally would put these Zeldas above Breath of the Wild. While there are moments where you don't have any language because you're doing a dungeon or something, then the rest of the game is mostly dialogue, whereas Breath of the Wild is like empty landscape without too many NPCs as well as dungeon type stuff, although not quite dungeons. With a couple of towns scattered about the world, but the main part about Breath of the Wild is that it isn't super populated because the world's kind of in not such a great place, whereas these games, the worlds are vibrant and lovely and really interesting, all with a kind of different theme, right? Wind Waker's much more brighter. Skyward Sword is a little bit more narrative driven and really interesting with the whole sky and everything. Twilight Princess, a little bit darker, but you have the companions, so you kind of always have someone to talk to. All three of these games are really, really good. And because they're really, really good, they all deserve to be in the A tier. Now, the tricky thing is though, I would say that these games are a little bit more narrative driven than some of the other Zeldas from the 3DS, but it really is only very slightly, just a little bit more dialogue, and it's not really enough to bump it up to the A+. And there is also the occasional cutscene that you can't really take at your own pace, but not too much to really affect gameplay or anything. So I don't quite feel confident putting it up all the way to the A+, but it's definitely in the A tier. So Wind Waker's fantastic, and then here Skyward Sword, also fantastic, and then Twilight Princess, also fantastic as well. Probably one of my personal favorites. I really enjoyed playing that when it came out on the Wii. Now Skyward Sword here is available on the Wii, Nintendo Switch, and Wii U. Twilight Princess, GameCube, Wii, and Wii U, as well as the Nvidia Shield TV apparently. And Wind Waker is only available on the GameCube as well as a Wii U HD remaster. So these are probably some of the best games on the Wii U for learning Japanese with. Next we have, Yokai Watch 4 for the Nintendo Switch and the PlayStation 4/5. So this is Yokai Watch 4+++, which is just a better version of Yokai Watch 4. And this is the last Yokai Watch game in this video. And it's very, very similar to the other Yokai Watch games. It's an A+. It could have been an S tier game because it does actually have a bit more voice acting than the other Yokai Watch games, but because the cutscenes are unpausable, unfortunately you can't take that all at your own pace. That does keep it away from the S tier, unlike Yokai Watch 1. So Yokai Watch 4 has its place next to Yokai Watch 2 and 3. here in the A+, with Furigana, push to continue, voice acting, but unfortunately unpausable cutscenes. There it is. Finally, we have the Animal Crossing games, Doubutsu no Mori. So here we have Animal Crossing New Leaf for the 3DS, as well as Happy Home Designer, and also Animal Crossing New Horizons for the Nintendo Switch. And these games have Furigana push to continue their cute little worlds, cute little towns you get to live in, meet the villagers. It has a lot of like repetitive language, also a lot of keigo practice, like polite speech, because a lot of the actual tanakis and stuff will speak a little bit more politely to you. So it's got a decent balance of like casual Japanese as well as more polite Japanese. It has a lot of potential for having push to continue in Furigana. No voice acting, however. One thing that I find that really lacks compared to some of the other games in this list though, is that it doesn't have written descriptions of all of the items. That would have been such a great opportunity. If you find a chair, have a written description of that chair, it would have been great to have something like that. Some of the other games in this list do have that, but Animal Crossing games unfortunately don't. Still incredibly good games for learning Japanese though, and they definitely deserve to be at around about the A tier because it's completely Furigana and easy to read. That being said though, I did actually play the whole game in Japanese. I felt like a lot of the language was quite repeated. There wasn't that much unique story. It was mostly like the same thing over and over again, which can be really good if you want to learn that particular language and really learn that because you get a lot of repetition. But the villagers eventually just kind of repeat the same kind of thing over and over. Like it's good. I don't think it's like better than these games for learning Japanese because there's so much variety that you get. I almost want to put it down at the A-, but then compared to these other A-, it doesn't deserve to be that low. So I definitely do need to put it here in the A tier. I think in overall difficulty, it does have a lot of keigo speech. It's way more difficult than all the Super Mario RPG games. It could perhaps be somewhere here like before Fantasy Life in terms of difficulty. I think that's a pretty fair place to put it. It also has some strange language, like when villagers talk, they might end their sentences in like weird endings. And that's mostly just like a flavor thing, but it can actually trip you up as a learner because you try and translate everything and you're like, what is this? What is this? And you can't tell that it doesn't mean anything. It's just a flavor thing. Still though, great games for learning Japanese with, so we definitely have to put them here in the A tier. Yeah, that seems a pretty fair placement. So New Leaf, New Horizons, and Happy Home Designer here in the A tier for having Furigana and push to continue. The A tier is pretty heavy, isn't it? There's a lot of really good games for learning Japanese that have Furigana, so that's definitely filling up the top part here. Oh, and speaking of great games here we have Yokai Gakuen Y. Now, I did say the previous Yokai Watch game was the final Yokai Watch game, and that was true because this isn't technically a Yokai Watch game. This uses a lot of the Yokai Watch characters, but it's a completely new experience. In fact, it's even better for a language learner. Yokai Gakuen Y is like set in a school filled with yokai. So much voice acting, way more than any Yokai Watch game. In fact, there's even some replayable voice acting, like as you're walking around, sometimes the characters will just say stuff, and normally that language is just gone forever. But not in this game. You can actually go to the menu and replay the stuff they say. You unlock it as you actually progress through the game. Voice acting, push to continue, Furigana, and even some of the voice acting is replayable. Unfortunately, the cutscenes aren't pausable though, but there aren't too many cutscenes. This really is an incredible game. Like there is so much voice acting and everything has Furigana. Everything, like it's just full of Furigana. Look at the menus. There's just like all of the mission text is just huge reading practice. There's summaries of what you need to do. Incredibly good for reading practice and listening practice. And you can take most of it your own pace. This has to be an S tier game. There is a tiny little fault with some of the cutscenes being unpausable, but it really isn't that many cutscenes. I don't think it deserves to be in the A+ tier because there really isn't that many cutscenes. It's very similar to Crayon Shinchan where there's like just a couple of moments when you're like, but not enough to actually be a serious negative. I think it deserves to be in the S tier. Really, really, really good game. I would say that it's probably a similar level to the Boku no Natsuyasumi games. Gakuen Y can be just a little bit more difficult for the more of the like kind of fantasy RPG type language that you see. In terms of difficulty anyway. Definitely a fantastic game for Japanese language learners. It really does deserve to be in the S tier. I would like to just add about Gakuen Y. I do think the original trilogy 1, 2, and 3 does have much easier language. So if you're a complete beginner, even though I actually personally like how Gakuen Y has all of these voice acting, all this wonderful stuff that makes it so much more interesting, I would probably still recommend 1, 2, and 3 more for a complete beginner. just because it's so beginner friendly. Okay, let's have a look what we have next. Oh, Beyblade! We have a Beyblade game! So Beyblade Burst God for the Nintendo 3DS is a pretty simple game with pretty easy language, furigana, push to continue, unfortunately no voice acting, but it has a pretty simple story. The dialogue is pretty easy and the gameplay is pretty easy as well. You just spin the Beyblade. But it's actually pretty fun to choose the right spot and see it spin around. This game is definitely, I would say, a bit more of like an A- game. I don't necessarily put it on the same tier as the A tier games, but it's still really good because there's just so much dialogue to read and full furigana, push to continue and stuff. So definitely a good one for Japanese language learners, especially if you're into Beyblade. It may not necessarily be the game for you if you're not into Beyblade, but hey, if you are, there you go. In terms of language, I have to put it the very easiest, just because majority of the dialogue is just talking about winning and beating each other. There really isn't too much overall story, so it's actually pretty simple. So Beyblade for the 3DS probably is the easiest game here at the A- tier. Okay, and next, one of my personal favorite games of all time, Buddy Mission Bond. This is like a manga come to life with really cool visuals, really cool music, really fun time, push to continue, furigana, voice acting. It even has logs with replayable audio and even replayable scenes. There's only one downside, just there are some cutscenes you can't pause. This really deserves to be an S tier game, an incredible game, but there are two things, the unpausable cutscenes and the furigana is a little bit tricky. So I've gone through and analyzed a bunch of the text in this game, and I've found out that Buddy Mission Bond's text only has furigana for kanji that are above grade 6 at school, which is about above the Kanken level 5. So Kanken level 10, 9, 8, 7, and 6 don't have furigana, but any kanji above grade 6 or Kanken 5 do have furigana. So this is a really good kind of transitionary game. For example, let's say you know all of the basic kanji and you don't want all of this furigana to make it so easy. You want a little bit of a challenge to push you with some of the kanji you already know. This is a fantastic intermediate game. When you're past the beginner stage and you're wanting to keep pushing yourself, an incredible game for you if you're an intermediate. If you're an intermediate, this game's S tier, 100%. It could be S- because of some of its flaws though, but I really don't want to put games that have too big of a flaw in the S- tier. And as it does have 2 flaws, I really do need to put it in the A+ tier. You know, this is really tricky. I really want to put this in S tier. I almost want to make S tier possible to have flaws because there's so many of these games that kind of deserve to be in S tier, but S tier really should be special. Like there's just nothing you're going to have a problem with. And so for that reason, Buddy Mission Bond is in the A+ tier. Now, in terms of the overall language, it's probably easier, more difficult, similar to the Layton games. It has a bit of that kind of detective vibe to it where you have to search around stuff. There are moments where the gameplay kind of gets in the way of you learning, so it's maybe a little bit more difficult in terms of everything, but yeah, it's around there. Fairy Tail and Naruto is definitely easier. It has a bit more difficult language like Keigo and stuff, so I'm going to put it at the more difficult end of the A+ tier. One of my personal favorite games though, I really do love it. I so hope we get to see more of the creators of Buddy Mission Bond, Ruby Party. They actually made some otome games, but I hope this isn't the only non-otome game they make. I hope they continue to make games like this because Buddy Mission Bond was just absolutely incredible. I just really would love just so many games just like this. Imagine if all your favorite manga was like this, like come to life with voice acting and push to continue and furigana. Who would need manga? You would just get these games. It would be just insane. Oh, I would love that. All of my favorite manga like this, please. Incredible. Really, really great game. Want to put it in the S tier, but it's an A+. Okay, and next we have Naruto X Boruto. Man, this game kind of hurts my heart because it's really good and it could have been better. This game is a complete retelling, a re-narration with even some of the scenes from the entire series of Naruto, including Boruto. It's huge. Huge. This game also only has furigana above the Kanken level 5. And it's completely voice acted. However, unfortunately, this game doesn't really have push to continue. And so this is a really tricky one because you have the entirety of Naruto, but you just don't have push to continue. What do we do here? Because I did say a prerequisite for being on this list is push to continue. A game should have push to continue in order to be passable. This game doesn't have it. Does that mean it should be a D tier? This game retelling the entirety of Naruto with furigana? And you can pause the cutscenes so you can still study with it. I just don't know what to do. You can also replay the scenes, so in case you miss something, you can always replay again and try and pause better next time. So it is usable, and it is definitely better than Super Mario Galaxy. Like, what do I do here? This is ridiculous. I feel like the only reasonable thing to do is to put it slightly less than a game with a similar problem, Kimetsu no Yaiba, Demon Slayer. That had a similar problem. However, Kimetsu no Yaiba, you can pause the gameplay in the battle and still read the text. This game, unfortunately, you can't. So that does put it down. So it should be here in the A tier. I don't know if I can justify such an incredible piece of material here for learning if you're a fan of Naruto. I don't know if I can put it in the A- tier with these games. I can't justify that. So it needs to be in the A tier. In terms of overall difficulty, it's somewhere here with Yu-Gi-Oh! And somewhere here with Blue Dragon and these RPGs. Let's put it just a little bit before Blue Dragon. It does have some difficult language, right, with a lot of like ninja terminology and stuff, but it is aimed at younger audience, so it's not ridiculously unplayable. I would think that actually Zelda has some more difficult language because there's some actual archaic stuff used. Maybe it's a bit harder than Wild Arms. I don't know. It's a tough one. I do want to put it in the A tier though, because it could be an incredible game for learning Japanese with if you just press pause. If you just press pause, it's amazing. I wish it was push to continue. I think I've said as much as I can. This is a really good game if you want to learn Japanese, especially if you want something that's going to improve your listening that you can kind of read along with at the same time. It's insane. The only downside is you need to press the pause button, and that could get pretty frustrating, so just keep that in mind. You can always replay though, so, you know, it kind of offsets it a little bit. If only this game just had push to continue in these cutscenes. They look like they should be push to continue. It even says the push button, but unfortunately it goes automatic. Such a shame. On further thought, I think I actually need to demote this to the B+. I'm sorry, guys. I don't know if I can keep a game that has this many problems in the A tier. It just seems a bit unfair for all of the other games that are in the A tier that are actually much more recommendable for beginners. And as most of the people looking for Furigana games are really going to be for beginners, if you're looking at this being like S being the most recommended to use for learning and then kind of ranking it that way, I don't think I can put this game above some of the other games that it's currently above. So I feel like I need to demote it down to the B+. It does have its negatives. As I was playing it, I was getting a little bit frustrating having to pause all the time. It is also a little bit buggy. Like I had to install an update for even the audio to play. Otherwise, it just skipped all of the cutscenes. I didn't get anything. I'm about this game. Okay, next we have, here we go. We have Disney Magic Castle 1 and 2 for the Nintendo 3DS. These games are pretty much like spending your time at Disneyland. If that's something that interests you, then these games might interest you as well. You get to meet all your favorite characters like Winnie the Pooh and Mickey Mouse, and you get to explore this cute little castle area. Full Furigana, push to continue, no voice acting, but a decent experience and great if you're interested in Disney. Both of these games will definitely need to be in the A tier, as they are very similar to the rest here, and they're definitely quite easy in terms of overall language. Actually, Spy Family shouldn't be that high. I think Spy Family should be a little bit more difficult, perhaps. Maybe Disney should be just after Mario. I think that's a pretty reasonable place to put these two Disney games. Just after the Mario RPGs. It's pretty friendly language because it's generally aimed at younger people who are really into Disney. But I really like this list already because we can see there's a whole bunch of games that are interesting to a whole bunch of different people. Whether you're young or old, there's a whole bunch of ranges of different games for you. It's really nice to finally see all of these Furigana games together. This really is close to every single Furigana game, so it's really nice to kind of see them all together finally laid out like this. Okay, next we have, Dragon Quest VII, incredible, fantastic game, full Furigana, push to continue. Unfortunately, no voice acting, but this game is for the Nintendo 3DS, and it's a fantastic game. Has to be A tier because it doesn't have any voice acting. This is a little bit trickier, right? It's a fantasy game, so let's put it around about here-ish. I think that's a decent place to put it. It may have a little bit more simple language than Wild Arms, which tries to be a little bit more mature. Fantastic game, highly, highly, highly recommended. really any Dragon Quest game is going to be great for you in your reading practice. The music goes so well with the learning experience. I find that sometimes like some of these games that don't have the best visuals and don't have the best soundtracks can be really grindy to try and learn Japanese with. But if you have a game with a really nice soundtrack that you kind of find yourself humming along to, especially like Dragon Quest, that stuff will get stuck in your head, then it's actually kind of really goes along well with the whole comfy place. Let's just pop in and learn some Japanese in your kind of comfort zone. Okay, next up we have Dragon Quest III Remake. This game hasn't come out yet, but it does have push to continue. It does have voice acting. I've been watching every trailer. It's like, come on, voice acting, please, please, please. And then finally, in one of the most recent trailers I saw, it has voice acting. I don't think the whole game is voice acted, but it does have voice acting. Even the bartender was voice acted. I saw a monster was voice acted. So it definitely has push to continue, Furigana, and voice acting, and it does not look like it's going to have too many cutscenes, so this could be an S-tier game. So I'm not sure. Again, it's an unreleased, so I'm going to put it here at the very, very end with Decapolice. It's an unreleased game. These two are unreleased, but they could be S-tier as long as they have pausable cutscenes or no cutscenes. They seem incredible for a Japanese language learner. High hopes for these two. Okay, next we have, what an interesting series here. So there are two games here in this series for the Nintendo DS. Here we have Nazo No Monogatari. And these games are like mystery short stories that you read. There's actually a narrator that speaks to you with voice acting. I actually have to re-record this because this game is way better than I thought. After actually playing a couple of hours myself, man, it is so awesome. So the whole game is pretty much like you have a narrated, spoken short mystery that you hear, and then you have to kind of try and solve it. But the answer isn't immediately clear. And so what you need to do is you need to ask questions about some of the words in the mystery reading. So you actually click on the words and then you drag them to other words to kind of form sentences. What? A game where you actually kind of form sentences, so you can actually kind of think in Japanese, like you think this and then you think plus this. And that actually kind of gets you starting to think about Japanese sentence structure, because then you actually see the sentence appear, the sentence you were trying to ask. And so it's got this amazing uniqueness to it. It's really incredible. Like, oh my God, level 5, this is crazy. And then as you inquire about these certain things, you get closer and closer to unraveling the mystery. And so you have this is really awesome. I love this. If you want a whole bunch of actually genuinely interesting reading practice, think about it. This is a very unique experience. You have to read a short little mystery in Japanese, so you have to understand all of that. Then you have to inquire about different words, so you're actually engaging with the vocabulary. And then you have to read the answers, getting even more Japanese reading practice to then kind of visualize the bigger concept of the story. That's amazing. The only main downside is, unfortunately, it is on the Nintendo DS, so the font isn't the most clearest, but it does have some voice acting, push to continue, and Furigana. Also, you want to take 5 guesses who made this game? Of course, level 5. Level 5. How could you make always amazing games? So these are definitely A+ games. In terms of the difficulty though, it's a bit tough. The difficulty of this game really lies in the fact that it's all text, so it's all based on your understanding, and you actually need to inquire about certain parts of the story and then understand those answers. The actual language isn't that difficult. If you have a look, most of the nouns and even the grammar functions in, for example, this sentence here are mostly at like the N5 to N4, so it's not too difficult. But just know that it does have an added level of difficulty because the game is entirely based around your understanding of what you've read. So there isn't going to be too much crazy language that's only in like this fantasy world or something like that. It's mostly like reading like a mystery novel. So I would say it's probably a bit easier than the Naruto games, a bit more difficult than Yokai Watch. I don't know about that actually. The Pokemon games are pretty easy. You know, actually, is it the easiest? I don't know if I could say that. That seems a bit weird. I'm going to put it here, right? It is not too difficult. Like, have a look. What do you think? It does use some grammar that's a bit higher level. It does have some vocabulary that's a bit higher level, especially comparing to some of these games that are really marketed and aimed at kids. This one's still, mostly aimed at a younger audience. It has Furigana, made by level 5, but it doesn't have too much of like a younger kiddie feel, and it's quite cool with the mystery theme. So really cool. A+ right here, smack bang in the middle, and there's 2 of those games smack bang in the middle. Personally, I see these games as S tier. If you can get over the DS font, they are unlike anything else on this list. but trying to keep things fair and balanced rather than my opinion, I'll be keeping it here at the A+. I think it's going to be pretty fun to count how many games from level 5 actually made it to this list. I feel like it's like half of this entire list is just level 5 games, man. Okay, next up we have Dragon Quest Treasures. So this is really very similar to Dragon Quest Builders 2. You have a bit of a narrative story, you have push to continue, and you have Furigana, but unfortunately not the entire game has Furigana. The menus and the items don't, so that really hurts it. For that reason, it is definitely an A-. It is an A tier game with some faults. There's a lot of Furigana to read, there's a lot of gameplay to enjoy, and a lot of interesting language to come across, and you get the Dragon Quest music and stuff. It definitely doesn't deserve to be down in the B tier, but it's definitely a flawed A tier game. Then next we have, Inazuma 11 1, 2, 3. I mentioned this earlier. These are the DS games, but these were re-released for the 3DS in a complete package. And there's actually 6 games in this pack. And so these games have Furigana, push to continue, and there even is some cutscenes with voice acting, but unfortunately, because they're 3DS games, you cannot pause the cutscenes. Again, a really common problem. It's not always a problem. Sometimes they put the text on the top screen and it's not a big deal, but for some reason, when they decide to put the text on the bottom screen during cutscenes or something, you press pause, it just ruins it all. So these games are definitely the same tier as Yokai Watch. These games, however, unlike the Go spin-offs, I feel like they're just a little bit lesser in tier. They should be in the A, not in the A+. In terms of difficulty though, they're quite easy. They're probably just after the Disney games because they are based in real life in Japan. A lot of the language used is language that's used in real life. It's mostly talking about soccer and school and stuff like that. So it's a pretty easy game in terms of language. It's pretty accessible, but I just don't like them quite as much as the other Inazuma 11 games. They're just a little bit older. They look like they're DS games. They're just a little bit not as nice, not as polished. So in the A tier with Furigana, push to continue, and some cutscenes that you can't pause. Okay, we're getting there. Oh, there we go. There's a big one right there. Dragon Quest 11. Dragon Quest 11, and in particular Dragon Quest 11 S. Make sure it's S, not the other one. This one has Furigana, push to continue, voice acting. All of the cutscenes are push to continue. What that means is that the cutscene will actually wait for you to press the button. It's incredible. Like the cutscene will actually just pause in the middle of motion in like a repetitive motion, waiting for you to press the button so that it continues on. Perfect, just perfect for language learners. If you want a full-fledged RPG that is very easy to study with, this has to be up here in the S tier. I would say next to Dragon Quest 3. I will put it down here at the end. This game is absolutely fantastic for Japanese language learners. Right now, this is the very best full JRPG to play if you want to learn Japanese with, and may actually end up the very best game on this list, but we still have some more games to go through. I would like to mention very quickly, however, though, is that this game can be a little bit tricky to buy with the right Japanese version. If you buy this on Steam, for some silly reason, it doesn't have Furigana. You can, however, get a very easy to install mod to put back in the Furigana. So just be careful. Make sure that the game that you're buying is the Japanese version of the game. Just because you buy it on Steam doesn't necessarily mean it's the Japanese version. If you're going to buy it on something like PlayStation 4 or Switch, from the Japanese version, you'll be all right. If you buy the English version, I'm not sure if you can switch or not. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. It really depends on your region and whether or not the game, the English version, actually has Japanese or not on it. So just make sure before you buy it. If you're uncertain and you're a bit worried, just buy the Japanese version off of Amazon or something. You'll definitely have the Japanese on it. This game is available everywhere: Nintendo, Switch, PC, PlayStation, even Xbox. It's very, very, very accessible. And there's even a demo that you can download so you can see if you like it or not. And the demo is actually pretty sizable. You'll probably get like, I don't know, 10 hours of gameplay if you're taking it slowly, reading everything in Japanese. It's a really big demo, so really, really, really highly recommend checking it out. Try out the demo. If you can manage to finish it, then you probably want to buy the game and keep playing. Absolutely S tier game for learning Japanese with. Okay, next we have, here we go. Here's the new Inazuma 11. This hasn't yet come out yet, but I did actually manage to play the demo version, and so I was able to check out everything, and it's a really good game for learning Japanese with. This is the best Inazuma 11 already. It's so polished and clean and really good. Lots of voice acting. Really nice. So this game does have push to continue. it has voice acting, it does have pausable cutscenes. So we have an S tier game. Absolutely deserving of an S tier. I would say in terms of difficulty, it's probably somewhere around here. Let's say it's easier than Yokai Watch because of the fact that there's that slang and the monsters and stuff, and soccer language really isn't that difficult. So this game's really cool. Furigana push to continue voice acting. It's so beautiful. Of course, it's made by level 5. I was having so much fun playing it, and actually this is the most beautiful set in Japan game on this list in like more city life. If you want more like school, suburban city life, this and Yokai Watch. If you want more countryside, you've got the Shin-Chan games down in S-. These are probably the best set in Japan games so far. And so Inazuma 11 Victory Road really blew me out of the water playing this game. It has everything you need. It's really interesting. The story actually seems quite interesting as well. I can't wait to actually get the full game. Furigana everywhere, in the menus, in the battles, in the items, everywhere. It is 100% accessible. An excellent game for learning Japanese with. Okay, what do we have left? Oh, this is a really interesting entry. We have a kanji game. How to write kanji with furigana and voice acting. What the? So this game, I think, just on principle alone, needs to go into the S+. It just has to. If there was any game that deserves to be an S+, this game where the whole thing is literally about learning Japanese, and it has furigana and push to continue, and you learn how to write kanji, it has to be S+. Incredible. In terms of the actual language, I would actually say it's the easiest, right? Like there really isn't that much dialogue that you need to read, really not that much at all. And in fact, it's all voice acted, although you will get a bit annoyed by the main character saying everything ending with Maru. This is really great, Maru. You really enjoy this game, Maru. You should play this game, Maru. Learn how to write kanji, Maru. Always Maru, Maru, Maru. But an incredibly good game for learning Japanese with, literally learning Japanese, how to write it. Tanoshiku Omoshiroku Kanken Shogakusei is made for the 3DS, and it's got to be the most approachable kanji learning game ever. It is, however, aimed at people in elementary school, that's shogakusei. So it does focus on a bit more of the lower level kanji. However, this game actually covers every single kanji you really need to know, all the way from level 10 up until level 2. And that's as much or even more kanji than Japanese people learn at school. So this is everything you need to know in order to play any of these games that don't have furigana, for example, like some of the games that have kanken level 5. Well, you'll be fine if you play this game first. If you want a game to help you learn kanji and how to write it, this is the game for you. It may not be the most comprehensive game, like for example Kanken Premium, which is one of my personal favorites, but for beginner learners of Japanese and the fact that it has furigana and there's even voice acting, it's amazing. You're just gonna have to get used to everything ending in Maru. Okay, and next we have, oh, finally, a real Pokemon game. We have Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. These are the first and only mainline Pokemon series games that have furigana. There was also Pokemon Arceus, but that was a little bit more of like a spin-off. This is actually the mainline series. They have gyms and all that kind of stuff. These games are really, really good for Japanese language learners. You have push to continue, so much text, furigana, even the Pokedex has furigana, actually the first Pokedex to have furigana. So if you want to learn Japanese with Pokemon, this is the game for you. It's not necessarily my most favorite Pokemon game, but it really is fun to explore the world and everything, so it has to be in the A tier. It doesn't unfortunately have furigana everywhere like in the menus, but it's definitely enough to enjoy learning Japanese with. So this game needs to be probably difficulty somewhere around the Inazuma 11 range, just a little bit more difficult because it's not all real life. There is a bit more like RPG language. The Pokedexes can sometimes have some tricky language in it, but probably the best mainline Pokemon game to learn Japanese with. Okay, we're finally at the final 2 rows, so many games. And now we have some more Zelda games here for the Nintendo DS. And this is really interesting. We have Spirit Tracks and Phantom Hourglass. Now, these games have furigana and push to continue, no voice acting or anything, and they are DS games, so the font is a little bit tough to read. One cool thing about these games, though, is they have optional furigana, because in order to see the furigana, you need to tap the word. So if you tap the word with your DS stylus, the reading will show up, and that's so cool. Like, I wish more games had this feature so you could choose whether to have furigana or not. Why isn't this just a built-in feature for every single game on PC? I don't know. It would be so great. Someone's got to make a mod to do this. That'd be so cool. Just tapping on any text in the game and just being able to see the readings. Wow. Although I guess there are some sort of apps that you can do that, like Kamui OCR and Yomi Ninja are doing stuff like that. So Zelda Spirit Tracks and Phantom Hourglass need to be around about the A-. The reason why is because just like other DS games that are a little bit more trickier to read, I need to put them here. They're pretty good games, right? Furigana and Push to Continue, but the font does just give it a couple of flaws, so it's an A-. Next we have Mario Golf Super Rush. This is a really interesting game. So this is definitely the best golf game for learning Japanese with. You can just play like golf and it's kind of fun, but there's actually like a story mode that you can progress with a whole bunch of characters that you talk to and a kind of progression to everything. And so there's actually a lot of dialogue to learn playing this game. So you get to enjoy playing golf games, which are always fun, but you also get a lot of Japanese dialogue, Push to Continue, and Furigana. No cutscenes you have to worry about. Really decent learning experience. So this game also needs to go in the A-, I would say. The reason why it's an A- rather than an A+, although it's probably one of the easiest games on the list, let's just put it slightly... yeah, actually, it probably could be the easiest game. This game is an A- rather than an A+ because it doesn't quite have as much dialogue as these A games do. Like, there's so much story in these. There's quite a lot of story in Mario Golf, but just not as much as the others. So I feel like it needs to just be just a little bit lower tier because it's a little bit more gameplay heavy. Like, most of the story is really at the beginning, but it's still got a lot of dialogue to go through. You will learn a lot of Japanese with this game. And it's definitely one of the best sports games or golf games to learn Japanese with. Oh, there it is. Ni no Kuni. This is a classic. One of the greatest RPGs ever made, definitely one of the greatest games ever made to learn Japanese with, an incredible experience. Everyone should experience playing this game at least once in their life, even if you're not learning Japanese. An incredible experience. Love this game so much. This is like if Ghibli came to life in video game form. It's incredible. Push to Continue, Furigana, absolutely everywhere. You actually have like a book that you can read about the world with pictures and everything, and you can zoom in and there's Furigana everywhere. Furigana in the battles and the menus, incredibly accessible, and of course, it's made by level 5. This game has Furigana, Push to Continue, voice acting, cutscenes, pausable cutscenes. You know where it's going. It's going right into the S tier. Now, first I want to talk about the DS release. This one is an S-. And the reason why is because it is a DS game, so the font is a little bit more trickier to read. So it does have some flaws, but it's still about as good as the remastered version that's available for the PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, Nintendo Switch, Steam. That being said though, the remastered version is definitely much better. When I say it's about as good, I'm more referring to what it has available for a Japanese language learner. It still has the Push to Continue, the Furigana, the voice acting, and the pausable cutscenes. But in terms of the actual overall experience, the remasters are way better. With having the whole book and everything that you can read and everything in the menu has Furigana, remaster is way better than the DS version. Pretty much anywhere you can get the remastered version of Ni no Kuni, and that is definitely an S tier. In terms of difficulty though, it is tough. I'm going to put it somewhere in like the mid here. It might actually be a little bit more difficult than Yokai Watch. Actually, it might even be a little bit more difficult than Gundam as well. And the reason why the language itself is a little bit tricky is because, yeah, it's an RPG game, so there's a lot of like fantasy text, and normally that would put it up a bit in the difficulty already, but there's a character called Shizuku, or I think Drippy in the English version, and he speaks Kansai Ben. So he speaks a very heavy Osaka dialect, and that's a really tricky thing for a beginner Japanese student to suddenly come across and have to face. And he's everywhere. He's a very common character. He's the sidekick of the main character. And so this guy is super duper hard. Honestly, if you're a beginner, just ignore what he says or just try your best reading it, but don't worry too much. He's a bit more of a comedy relief character, honestly, but he is, pretty important to the story. But unfortunately, that does make it quite difficult. Everything else is fine, but he's quite difficult. If you want a bit of help on Kansai Ben, I actually made a video going through the most essential Kansai dialect, so make sure to check that out. I'll put a link in the description, maybe even a clicky thing right here. That video should get you relatively familiar with most of like the sentence enders that he's going to use and what he's actually saying in more standard Japanese, and hopefully that'll help make this game a bit easier. But one of the best games ever made. Love it so much. I wish there was more voice acting in the final part, but man, what an experience. What an experience. Ni no Kuni 2, forget about it. Don't play Ni no Kuni 2. It's terrible. No Furigana, terrible. No voice. It's just terrible. Terrible game, not voice acting. It's like, I don't even believe that Ni no Kuni 2 exists. This is the only one that exists. Ni no Kuni 1, an incredible, incredible game for learning Japanese and an incredible experience in and itself. And another level 5 game. Okay. Oh, Princess Peach Showtime. This is a new one. So this is a really interesting entry here because this game has Furigana and push to continue, and it actually has quite a lot of dialogue, like way more than like a Super Mario Galaxy. So it's definitely higher ranked. It's definitely higher than B tier. It could be B+, for example. It has quite a lot of dialogue to go through. It's quite easy as well. Very friendly, very pretty. It's, you know, Nintendo. There is some language though that you can't really take at your own pace. Sometimes language just kind of flies by, and there are a lot of like NPCs that talk, but you don't necessarily have to click on them. They'll just say something, but sometimes that'll disappear. So if you're trying to study and then it goes away, that could be really frustrating. So I would say it's probably like a B+ game. It's not quite as reliable as an A- game, but it's still really, really good. It would be the king of the B+, perhaps. A really interesting game and a nice kind of experiment. I hope they kind of make a game like this with Donkey Kong. That'd be cool. More of a story Donkey Kong. I'd love that. Please, Nintendo, give me more Donkey Kong. Where's the Donkey Kong? Next we have, Fushigi Dagashi Zen Nintendo. This is another one of those kind of storybook games. There's a whole bunch of stories that you get to read, and it's really uniquely, this has vertical text. So this is one of the only games to actually give you vertical text practice with Furigana. So that's incredible, right? It does actually have voice acting. The narrator does speak, and it's all push to continue and everything. So it's very, very accessible. It even has replayable audio for the few voice lines that are actually in the game. I could put it at S tier, but I don't really feel it quite as much. I feel like it should be A+. It's very impressive. It's similar to the A+. If this game, it doesn't quite have as much voice acting as I would like if the stories were voice acted, then it should be S tier. But it's really unique for the fact that it actually teaches you and lets you practice vertical reading, which is like one of the most rarest things to find in a video game, and actually a really useful skill if you're wanting to get into reading books, because a lot of the time there is actually vertical reading in books, and it does take quite a bit to get used to. I just think because it's not quite as interesting as some of the other games, it is really just a book with a couple of voice lines here and there. But if that's what you're after, that could be really good. But I'm going to put it on a similar vein to like these novel games, perhaps with less voice acting. I'm not sure, maybe about the same amount. Definitely clearer text though, because this game is on the Nintendo Switch. It's a very interesting entry. Actually, I don't think I can put it quite in the same difficulty level. It's quite difficult, right? Looking at this text, it's definitely more difficult than Naruto and Fairy Tail. It's a little bit more like a Layton game, for example, but even then, maybe a bit more difficult because it's like a novel, right? It has like novel style language. It's a little bit more difficult. Whereas the other one was a bit more like a short story. This is more like an actual novel. Well, still quite a short story, but not quite as short as these games. Okay, we're getting closer and closer. We have the Doraemon Harvest Moon games. Bokujo Monogatari. So this game is known as Doraemon Story of Seasons, and there's also a sequel, Doraemon Story of Seasons, Friends of the Great Kingdom. And so these games are really cool. They're beautiful games, really nice artwork, push to continue, Furigana. The first game doesn't have voice acting, but the second game does. However, unfortunately, these games really should have Furigana on the items, because that's what you're going to be interacting with all the time, planting things, picking things up, selling, growing your farms, and doing all that kind of stuff. And the fact that it doesn't have Furigana, unfortunately, I have to put these at a lower rank. Also, the story is mostly heavy in the beginning, but then later on it's just more like talking to NPCs here and there. There is a bit of a narrative, but I can't quite put it as the same level as these A tier games. So for that reason, I need to put Doraemon Story of Seasons as a B+ game. It's definitely pretty easy in terms of the language, but it really is unfortunate it doesn't have Furigana everywhere, and this game unfortunately doesn't have voice acting. And I'm going to put the sequel as an A-, and probably... yeah, this is a really tricky one because it does have Furigana push to continue with voice acting. That should be amazing, right? And I feel like it could be, but the fact that it misses so much Furigana in places where it should have it, I just don't know if I can put it in the A tier. But for that same logic, I need to put the sequel here in the A-, but I actually think I need to demote Tears of the Kingdom also to A- because it has the exact same problem. But even worse because there's cutscenes that you can't pause. There is a lot of people you can talk to, which is great, but it is also very gameplay heavy. And I feel like it should be one tier up from Breath of the Wild. So I'm just going to demote Tears of the Kingdom just to the A-, and that kind of feels right now to have the sequel to Doraemon Story of Seasons in the A-, but the first one here in the B+. They're definitely like some of the best ones here, but yeah, it makes sense. Look, it's also next to the other Story of Seasons games. This is the right ranking, definitely. Okay, next we have Monster Hunter Stories 1 and 2. These games are really good. So glad these games were made. They're kind of like an RPG turn-based version of Monster Hunter. Very cute, very nice and bright colors, Furigana everywhere, push to continue, and even with some voice acting, but unfortunately you can't pause the cutscenes. Most of the dialogue is push to continue when you're talking with the characters, but when it's a pre-rendered cutscene, unfortunately you can't pause them. So it could have been like an S tier game, but it does need to be downgraded because of the fact that you can't pause those pre-rendered cutscenes. For that reason, both Monster Hunter Stories and Monster Hunter Stories 2 deserve to be at the A+. They are very good games for learning Japanese with very accessible way to get into Monster Hunter. Also just a really accessible way to get into RPGs. I would say in terms of overall difficulty, they're probably around here. Yeah, Fairy Tail, maybe even easier than Fairy Tail actually. Fairy Tail has quite a bit of magic. Yeah, the language is actually pretty easy having a look. Definitely around that level. It's really accessible. It's not going to be too difficult. Very nice entries here. Definitely deserving of an A+. Fantastic games for learning Japanese with. Fantastic as well for getting into the Monster Hunter series. Really good. Both of these games are wonderful. Actually, I just have to add a little bit here because these games are even better than I made them sound. Most of what I said was aimed at Monster Hunter Stories 2, but after playing a whole bunch more of Monster Hunter Stories 1, it's way better. Way better. So one thing I found out is actually both games do have replayable cutscenes. You can actually go to your house and replay any of the cutscenes that you weren't able to pause. So that does change a lot. That being said though, Monster Hunter Stories 2 has some really weird cutscenes where it's not just the pre-rendered cutscenes, but even the character cutscenes you can't pause, and there's quite a lot of it. I just don't feel as comfortable learning Japanese playing Monster Hunter Stories 2 as much as I did with number 1. Oh my god. So you do have those pre-rendered cutscenes that you can't pause in Monster Hunter Stories 1. They're actually really nice. They kind of remind me of like PS1 era graphics. They're really cool. But the really important thing is that so much of this game has kind of Dragon Quest XI style cutscenes where the entire thing is push to continue. The voice acted cutscenes are push to continue. What? That is so amazing. And the level of the language is actually much more beginner friendly. I have to promote Monster Hunter Stories 1 to S- tier, and it's only S- because it does have the flaw that you can't pause the cutscenes, but you can replay them. I highly recommend Monster Hunter Stories 1. It is incredible for a language learner. In terms of overall benefits, it definitely deserves to sit right next to No Kuni in terms of benefits for a language learner. It's incredible. Actually, it may even be better because it has the replayable cutscenes. Highly recommended. Okay, next we have, Naruto Ultimate Ninja 1. So we already saw 2 and 3 as well as the Shippuden ones. This one is a bit of a lower ranking. I need to put this at around about the B+. The reason why is that it does have push to continue, it has Furigana, and it has voice acting, but it's mostly just a fighting game without having the story mode. So it's just going to be a little tiny bit of story before the fight, and then it kind of goes through like an arcade mode of sorts. You do get some of the story, and it is voice acted, it is Furigana, it is push to continue, so it's quite nice, but it's not too much story, and that's why it needs to be here in the B+. I guess similar to like the Shinchan, right? It's somewhere around there. In terms of difficulty, yeah, let's put it around here, right? It's somewhere in the middle. It's not too difficult, there isn't too much dialogue, but it has Furigana, voice acting, and push to continue, so I can't put it any less than B+. Right, almost getting to the final line. Hey, Sonic Unleashed, or known in Japanese as Sonic World Adventure. This game actually does have Furigana on both Nintendo Wii, PlayStation 2, and PlayStation 3. And so they have push to continue, Furigana, and even voice acting. So you get to play pretty decent Sonic games that have Furigana and voice acting. Now it is a bit more heavier on the gameplay, but there is a bunch of story sections, so it's actually really interesting for a learning game. Really happy to get a Sonic game on this list. As far as I know, this is the only Sonic game with Furigana and push to continue. There is one more Sonic game with Furigana, and that's Sonic and the Black Knight, but unfortunately that's not making this list as it's not push to continue. continue. So Sonic World Adventure has to be in the B+, right? It has more story than, for example, the Naruto game, and it has just about as easy dialogue, perhaps even easier, perhaps more like Chocobo Adventure level of easy. Actually, Chocobo Adventure might be a little bit more difficult than the Harvest Moon games. Sonic World Adventure has a pretty accessible level of language. A lot of it's just like instructionals or just a little bit of dialogue between Sonic and the little guy. A really fun game. I actually really enjoyed Sonic Unleashed. I'm not sure why people don't like it as much. I actually really enjoyed having both the two different gameplays where you like run around and smash things, but also the super fast levels. I liked having both. Really cool game with Furigana and voice acting. So a Sonic game with Furigana, push to continue, and voice acting. An excellent game on this list. Next we have, this is for the Nintendo 3DS. Taiko no Tatsujin Mystery Adventure. And you may have seen the Taiko games before. These are like the drum games. If you've ever been to like a Japanese arcade and you see people going crazy on the drums, this is the same kind of thing. But this is actually an RPG kind of game that also includes some of the drum beating. And so this now has a story, and they included Furigana as well as push to continue, and even a little bit of Japanese voice acting. So because of the fact that it has the trifecta, it needs to be a high rank. Now, I don't quite think this game should be an A tier. It's pretty good. It does actually have Furigana, push to continue, a little bit of voice acting. So it should definitely be somewhere in the A tier, but I think it should be the A- just because it doesn't quite have as much story as these games. And it's not particularly the most interesting story or anything. It's mostly just playing for the beats. It's kind of like an entry game into the drum games. But similar to like Mario Golf, for example, you can have fun and learn a bit of Japanese with a little bit of voice acting as well. That being said, though, unfortunately, though, there isn't any Furigana on the menus as well, so kind of keeping it down in its rank. Okay, let's have a look at what we have next. We have Time Travelers. This game is incredible. This game has push to continue, voice acting, Furigana. It is also made by the glorious Level 5, and it's kind of a time travel-y game where like you have to make a choice about actions to do, and then good and bad outcomes can happen, and then you have to like rewind and redo it. That means there are replayable scenes as well. So it's a really good game for Japanese language learners. However, there are some downsides, unfortunately. You also can't pause the in-game cutscenes, but you can pause the pre-rendered cutscenes. Distinguishing between the two is pretty difficult, so let's just pretend it doesn't really have pausable cutscenes. But because you can replay it all, that's certainly a positive. So most of the game is voice acted with replayable cutscenes, which means replayable audio, which means it technically is studyable, just a little bit tricky. I feel like really it needs to be in the A+. It really is great. Really, really cool game made by the Kami-sama Level 5. Oh, thank you so much, Level 5-sama, for blessing us with all of your gifts. Level 5-sama makes all of the amazing games. Really amazing. So really good time, but there are some negatives because of the fact that you can't pause the cutscenes, but you can replay them, so that hopefully kind of fixes that problem. Hey guys, a quick correction again. So Time Travelers, it is really, really good. I really love the game so much. It has so much personality and charm, but it is pretty annoying the fact that most of the cutscenes you can't pause, and replaying doesn't really help learning because it's so long ago since you have to play, and then you have to watch the whole cutscene. And then those cutscenes that you can actually pause, it's so bad. Like the subtitles disappear immediately. So you either have to press pause as soon as they start talking, which means you've ruined the whole great part about having voice acting. You cannot press it after they finish talking. It just immediately disappears. And so it's really just a push to continue Furigana reading thing about the short story that you get about what's happening, the events. But then most of the charm of this game is actually the beautiful cutscenes that kind of showing what's happening with all the Furigana and the voice acting. But the fact you can't take that at your own pace, I think it needs to be demoted to A. I don't think it deserves to be A+. I could actually even demote it even more. I don't know. This is a real tough one. I love this game, but it has some flaws for a language learner for sure. And I think you'd need to be a much higher level student to actually use this game, because there's going to be so much of the experience that is almost like just like watching Japanese TV, for example, except the benefit is you have Japanese subtitles with Furigana. It's pretty hard to use. There is some push to continue text, but a lot of it is this voice acted stuff that you really can't pause very well. I think A is kind of a decent middle ground. It is good, but okay, we're very much down to the end. Oh, next is Dragon Ball Z Kakarot. Anime fans have the best options when it comes to learning Japanese, man. Dragon Ball Z Kakarot has push to continue, Furigana, however only Furigana above level Kanken 5 or grade 6 at school, just like Naruto X Boruto that we saw before, as well as Buddy Mission Bond that we saw. This game's incredible. It relives the entirety of Dragon Ball Z and even some of the other stuff after Dragon Ball Z. There's a huge world to explore, so many characters to interact with, voice acting everywhere, great gameplay, just incredible experiences. I could not recommend this more. If you're a big fan of Dragon Ball Z, this is the game to play. Absolutely an A+ game. It could even be an S tier game. I think, however, because it is missing all of the Furigana, I need to give it the same treatment as the other anime games and the same as Buddy Mission Bond. It needs to be somewhere around here. Let's keep it around the Naruto level. I think that's probably a reasonable place to put it, somewhere smack bang in the middle, but a really good A+ game. A lot of fun to have. It's actually got really fun gameplay. I love this game. I love it so much. I use it in almost every grammar video because I love it so much. Relive all your favorite moments from Dragon Ball. You get to interact with all your favorite characters. It's just an incredible game. Explore the world. Great, great stuff. A fantastic game for learning Japanese with. Such a great game. The best way to experience Dragon Ball through video games in Japanese. Thanks to the Furigana, the voice acting everywhere, push to continue. Just incredible. So good. Also, a really cool thing about this game is once you finish the entire game, you can actually replay the scenes, actually replay the entire game, and you can travel to any point in the time with the time machine. You unlock Trunks' time machine by beating the game. So while it's not immediately usable to replay the scenes, once you finish the game, you can actually keep replaying the scenes as many times as you want. Okay, next up, oh my god, the darkest, most mature game on this entire list, Shin Megami Tensei 4. Now, this is just the first release, not the second release, like the expansion release or the redo. I think it's like Shin Megami Tensei 4 Apocalypse or something. Not that version, that doesn't have Furigana, but just the original 4 does have Furigana. And this has push to continue, Furigana, and voice acting everywhere. There's so much voice acting in this game. If you're looking for a dark, mature story, almost berserk level in terms of kind of graphic gore and stuff like that, some of the enemy monsters are really kind of creepy and stuff, this is the game for you. Definitely the most mature game on this list. I would love more than anything to put it in the S tier. It has everything you need, push to continue, voice acting, but unfortunately, there are cutscenes that are not pausable. So unfortunately, we have to demote it to A+, like so many other great S tier games that don't have pausable cutscenes. It is quite difficult, right? I gotta put it down here in the real difficult stuff. In fact, it may be the second most difficult game in the A+. It has a lot of more mature language. It's quite dark, but man, if you're looking for a dark game, if you're looking for a mature game, I don't know why this game has Furigana, but it does, and I'm very, very thankful for it. This game will get you into reading stuff like Berserk. This game will get you into any kind of dark thing. This game will get you ready for things like Fire Emblem. This is the game you should play if you want to get to any of those kind of more darker fantasy type games. Play this game first. You'll be exposed to so much of the language that you'll see in more darker fantasy RPG type games. Hell, even Nier, this game could help you get into it. Oh, next we have Little Town Hero. This is actually made by the same company that made Pokemon, Game Freak. And this is kind of a nice, light little introduction to fantasy RPGs. It's a much more lighter kittier. It's like complete contrast to Shin Megami Tensei 4. This is now much more lighter and happier and bright, but a cute little entry into fantasy RPGs. This game has Furigana and push to continue, but unfortunately nothing more than that. And it's not completely Furigana in the menus and everything, so it is lacking a little bit. But it has a lot of dialogue and it's a nice comfy one. I'm probably gonna have to put this in the A-. I think it's kind of similar-ish to some of these games in this region anyway. I guess more like the Dragon Quest type stuff, right? But a bit easier in terms of language. So maybe somewhere around here like Doraemon. It has a pretty decent amount of dialogue, but it's really unfortunate it didn't go quite as full on as it could have done with the Furigana in both the battles and the menus and all that kind of stuff. It does kind of hold it down a bit. Actually, you know, like I kind of feel like maybe because it doesn't have voice acting, maybe it should even be a B+ game, to be honest. Yeah, look, that's the same thing with these Story of Seasons games. It should be a B+ game. Sorry, Little Town Hero, you've been demoted. Okay, we're getting really close to the end. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 more. This is a repeat. We're at the final 9 games. And so we have Pokemon Arceus, or Pokemon Arceus, as the next game on this list. This is a really, really great game. Really fun to play. I had a ball playing it. Very much like a spin-off of the Pokemon series where it's a little bit more action-y, right? You get to run and dodge, explore, that type of thing. fascinating, really cool game. It is actually one of the first Pokemon games to have Furigana if you don't count the Mysterious Dungeon series. Huge explorable areas with Pokemon everywhere. It has Furigana, push to continue, and it definitely needs that Furigana because some of the language is really quite tough. There's even some archaic type kanji in this game. Definitely a difficult game. And unfortunately, this game doesn't have Furigana in the Pokedex, so it's really just the dialogue you're going to be learning from. And honestly speaking, the story in this game isn't necessarily its strongest point. And so as this game is also lacking Furigana in its menus as well, I don't think it really should be good enough to be in the A tier. I think it's missing some stuff, and considering Scarlet and Violet is in the A tier, and that's way better for a language learner because of the fact that it has Furigana in the Pokedex and everything, which is a huge reward, I think A- is the right place to put Pokemon Arceus. It's definitely on the difficult end. In fact, yes, right next to Tears of the Kingdom, I think it has much more difficult language because it is kind of set in like olden day Japan, so there's a little bit more olden day speech, definitely some olden day kanji, like when you look at character customization, so it's a little bit more on the difficult end. It's not the game that I would recommend if you wanted to get into Pokemon. If you wanted to get into Pokemon, it's definitely a choice between the Mysterious Dungeon games or Scarlet and Violet. That is, if you're looking for a game that has Furigana at least. Next up, we have, this is the original Another Code for the Nintendo Wii. Now, because of the fact that there is a re-release in this game, I wasn't sure whether to include this, but it is a game and it is separate and it has a different ranking. So this game has Furigana and push to continue, but no voice acting or anything like that, unlike the remake. This is a solid A tier game though, by itself. It is really good. It also has pretty approachable language, probably easier than Spy Family, so maybe somewhere around here. I'm not sure if there's any real reason to play this game and not the Nintendo Switch remakes, which have voice acting and are even better with a log and everything. But just so you know, this game is on the Nintendo Wii. It does have Furigana and push to continue. Another code R. Okay, now we have Super Mario Odyssey. What a wonderful game to play. This game has a little bit more story than most of the other 3D exploration Super Mario games. And that's something that I'm very happy about. I hope they go even more in that direction with the next Mario game. It does kind of feel like they're doing that very slowly. Like Galaxy had a lot of story. Even Mario 64 had a decent amount of story, but it kind of like seems to be ramping up just very gradually with each game. Mario Odyssey has an actual narrative along with it. It even has a companion that you talk to. And there's a whole bunch of text you can come across with the NPCs around the world. There's even maps that have text to read, although not Furigana. This is a really decent game. I think I still need to keep it in the B tier. It's not quite as text heavy as some of these other games. It doesn't quite have the advantages like voice acting like some of these, but it's a very comfy Mario game. Wonderful experience playing this game in Japanese. It always makes me so happy playing these Super Mario games. I wish there were Donkey Kong games like this as well with some dialogue, but I guess Donkey Kong doesn't really talk, so I guess that's kind of hoping for something that's unlikely to ever happen. But okay, and now day 3 of recording. This is going to be quite a long video, I think. Let's have a look at what we have next here. So we have, okay, we're almost finished. We have some Doraemon games for the Nintendo 3DS. Now, there are actually 2 games. Correction, there are actually 7 games on the 3DS. And these games are actually way better than I originally thought. So the deal with these games is that they're actually made every single year on the 3DS that the 3DS was around, and they were based on the Doraemon movie that came out at the similar time. And most of these games are full push to continue, voice acting with Furigana. Insanely accessible learning games for people learning Japanese. There is a lot more sillier language because it's aimed at kids and it's kind of cartoony and stuff like that, but it's also very basic language. Think of these games very much as the equivalent of watching the Doraemon movie, but you get to do push to continue and the Japanese subtitles have Furigana, with a couple of fun mini games mixed in between here and there. And so there are 6 games with push to continue, Furigana, and voice acting. And so the game that came out in 2012 is the only one that doesn't have voice acting, and that's Nobita and the Island of Miracles. And then every other game has mostly full voice acting. There are parts without voice acting, but there is a lot of voice acting. So 2013's Nobita's Secret Gadget Museum, 2014 Nobita and the Haunts of Evil, 2015 Nobita's Space Heroes, 2016 The Birth of Japan, 2017 The Great Adventures in the Antarctic, and 2018 Treasure Island. And so all of those games have push to continue, Furigana, and voice acting, incredibly accessible for a language learner, particularly a beginner, and particularly interesting for someone who's a young beginner. And so because of this, just like the Shinchan games, I'm actually going to promote the Doraemon games up to the A+. So ignore the visuals, they say B+, that's not correct. I've put these at A+. they are really good for learners of Japanese. The only real downside this game has for a language learner is just that it's aimed at a younger audience, but that can actually sometimes be really good for a language learner. Definitely an A+. Okay, and next up, oh, here we have Shadowverse Champions Battle. Another game I came across for the first time researching this video. This game is ridiculous. This game has Furigana, push to continue. The game is actually set in Japan, so it's kind of more real-world vocabulary and everything. It has a log with replayable audio. It's not too difficult language. And it's kind of like an introduction to Shadowverse, if you've heard of that game. This goes straight into the S+ tier. This is ridiculous. I'd say it's a little bit more easier than Famicom Detective, but a little bit more difficult than these games. So what an incredible game for Japanese language learners. This game is definitely the most level 5 kind of DNA of all of the games on this list that isn't produced by level 5, but you could almost believe it is if you look at it. It has like full Furigana everywhere. I think it actually has some of the most voice acting of all the games in this list. There's a lot of voice acting. I haven't finished the entire game myself, but going through hours of footage on the internet, you can almost always, anytime you go to a different part in the game, it's voice acted. It's so much voice acting. Push to continue, Furigana, logs, replayable audio, perfect, absolutely flawless, overkill. The gameplay is really simple and easy to understand, and it's actually pretty enjoyable. The art style is pretty decent. It really does have a kind of level 5 feel of polish to it. Really impressed by this game. If you want something that's a little bit more interesting than a visual novel with a little bit of gameplay that's actually somewhat enjoyable with the card game, with Furigana absolutely everywhere, voice acting everywhere, this game is so ridiculous. You can even pause the cutscenes, and not only that, you can even access the log during the cutscenes. This game is just ridiculous. This is so perfect for language learners. It's almost like someone was listening to my videos and checking every single thing they needed. There is no game that has as much as this game does for learners of Japanese. It has everything, absolutely everything, except perhaps replayable scenes, like actually being able to replay the whole thing. I'm not sure about that one, but everything else, it's S+++++. It is perfect for a language learner. Next up, we have a silly game here. We have Oshiri Tante, literally butt detective. And as you can see, it is a butt and it is a detective. So you can tell this game is definitely set for a younger audience. And it's really interesting because this game has push to continue and Furigana, but it only has kanji around the level 10 to 9 kanken level. That's incredibly low. That's like the N5 level. Everything else is hiragana. So you can definitely see this game is intended for younger audiences. And there's a whole bunch of butt jokes and stuff, and it's quite funny. Even the sidekick is like a brown dog, and anyway, it's a very silly game. But this game does have push to continue, it does have Furigana, it does have some voice acting as well as pausable cutscenes, making it a pretty decent learning game. I think it's still in the kind of B+ tier, right? It's kind of similar vein as these, where it's not like full-fledged games that are in the A tier, but it's it's silly, it's fun, it's very light, it's not too heavy. I definitely would put it in this trio of kind of silly younger games aimed at kids, but definitely a silly, light and humorous Japanese learning experience. Next up we have, oh, this is a cute, comfy game, kind of like a penguin cafe. It's a very warm, nice, cute game. You spend time in like a penguin cafe through different seasons in Japan. It's very cute, very comfy. Very simple and easy language. There's a couple of mini games. This game has Furigana, push to continue, and a tiny bit of voice acting. Probably one of the coziest games in this entire list. I would put this around the B+, I believe. It's not, again, it's not quite a full-fledged game like the A tier games, but it is pretty good, and it does actually have voice acting, so, you know, it is quite good. Definitely here among the top of the B+ tier. One potential downside of this game is the font. It is a little bit trickier to read because it's going for this kind of cute vibe, but because it has Furigana, that makes it not too much of a problem. You can still look it up and be like, oh, that's the kanji. So if you're looking for a cute, comfy game to learn Japanese with, this could be the game for you. Okay, almost finished. Oh, we have the final 2 games. So the second to last game here we have is Mario and Rabbids Sparks of Hope, or in Japanese known as Galaxy Battle. This is actually a pretty decent game for learning Japanese with. It has Furigana, although not necessarily full Furigana on all the menus and everything. Push to continue, no cutscenes you really have to worry about. And one really amazing thing for a Mario game is it actually has some voice acting. So the robots in this game actually speak, and they speak throughout most of the game, so that's super rare for a Mario game. So we have push to continue, Furigana, and some voice acting. So while it's not fully voice acted, you do still get some Japanese listening practice playing this game. with push to continue and Furigana. So the story side of this game is actually really good. It's up here in the A tier in terms for a language learner. There's quite a bit of story, but there's also quite a bit of gameplay, and it's not necessarily too much language while you're actually playing the game that actually has Furigana and stuff like that. I would probably want to put it here in the A tier. B tier feels a bit wrong. However, there are some negatives. The menus and stuff don't have Furigana, making it quite difficult. It's again one of these kind of borderline games. The A-, B+ is a bit tough to kind of really completely differentiate. They're actually quite close to each other. Princess Peach Showtime is very similar in terms of all of the positives and negatives, just without the voice acting. So that could be perhaps why it's in the B+ rather than in the A-. Whereas the A- is filled with quite long games with a lot of story to cover, just they're not necessarily full Furigana everywhere, which is where Mario and Rabbids fits in, but it also has voice acting, which should make it even better, but I think putting it down here to the A- is the right place. In terms of difficulty, it's tough. It's a Mario game, so it's never going to be too difficult. I would definitely put Zelda generally as more difficult language than Mario, for example. It's not going to be as easy as like the everyday language type games, which is a lot of the stuff here. Not necessarily as difficult as the Dragon Quest games, so somewhere here in the middle. Yeah, I feel like somewhere in the middle is a good place. It's not necessarily super easy, but it's not necessarily super difficult. It's an interesting balance. Just be careful though, it's only this Mario and Rabbids game, Sparks of Hope or Galaxy Battle. This is the only one of the games that make it in this tier list with Furigana as well as voice acting. The other ones are not good enough to be in this top 100. Okay, and drumroll, we have the very, very final game on this list, and what a game to have as the final game on this list. We have Tokyo School Life as well as Malice Code. These are available on the Steam store, and I believe Tokyo School Life is also available on the Nintendo Switch. And this is just a ridiculous game. So not necessarily my cup of tea. I'm not huge on the whole visual novel thing. I'm a bit more of like a mature kind of berserk, darker type story guy. Like Shin Megami Tensei is a bit more my flavor. But it is undeniable. This game is incredible for a Japanese language learner. Absolutely ridiculous. Tokyo School Life and Malice Code has Furigana, push to continue, voice acting, logs, replayable audio, and something no other game on this list has, you can also display the English at the exact same time. What in the world? So it's pretty obvious these two games go straight to the S+ tier, and honestly, they're probably in terms of if I could make another tier, they would be up there. While the story isn't necessarily for everyone, it's a kind of a romance story here, and you're an exchange student, you're going to Japan. It is definitely an incredible one for learning Japanese because Furigana voice acting, push continue, even English at the same time. The subtitles are somewhat similar to the Japanese translation, so it is actually somewhat useful. It's just ridiculously good. I would say though, in terms of difficulty, it does use a little bit more difficult language than these two games, but definitely a bit more easier than Shadowverse, and it is set in real life in Japan, so almost every single piece of vocabulary, most of the grammar you come across is all just going to be normal stuff that you would use in normal life, so it's actually a pretty useful game for learning Japanese with. Very similar to Shadowverse, where it's like beyond perfect, but this is even beyond perfect because it also displays English at the same time, so you don't even need a dictionary. While it would be nice to actually look up the individual words so you actually learn what each individual part is, you could just go through the whole thing and just play and read both Japanese and English and get some Japanese while you're playing. It's ridiculously useful for a Japanese language learner. The only prerequisite is that you need to be into the visual novel genre. And just quickly, before we move on to finalizing the tier list and going through all of it in a summary, I just want to give a special mention to Wago Tabi. This game is actually a Japanese learning game that's available on Steam, and it's actually really good for learning Japanese. I've actually been intending on making a video about this for a while now. I've just been really busy with all the videos I've been making, but I would like to make a video on this very soon. You can actually check this game out with the demo, and so while it's not fully in Japanese, it does actually have Furigana when you unlock the Japanese, because the way this game works is that you kind of learn Japanese in stages. You slowly replace your English with Japanese, and that's actually exactly the concept that I've always imagined would be the best kind of ideal way to actually learn Japanese, is doing it gradually, replacing your English, like you're playing a game and then you acquire the language as you kind of visit spots. And this is a really interesting game. It's actually almost exactly how I imagined an actual good Japanese learning game would be. where you actually have a little bit more of a relatable experience and you acquire Japanese as you progress. You kind of unlock words and stuff like that. And sometimes characters will say stuff and you don't understand what they're saying, almost like Final Fantasy X speech, right? But it's written in Japanese, but you don't know it yet. But then you learn how to actually get past that stage by learning the word. And it has some really interesting mini games if you're wanting to learn like hiragana and stuff. It goes through basic Japanese, but it doesn't go through all of the kana first and then do kanji. It actually teaches you kanji at the same time as kana, which is a really interesting approach, something I actually quite agree with. So this game does eventually have Furigana when everyone around you is speaking full Japanese. A very interesting one. There is a demo available, so feel free to check it out, and I'd like to make a video on it. Let me know if that's something you'd like to see. So Wagotabi definitely deserves a special mention. On a similar note, I'd also like to briefly mention Koe. Shoutouts to Mad Wraith and Rainbow Bright from the Game Gengo Discord community for introducing this game to me. This game also has Furigana, and it's kind of somewhere in between a Persona-style RPG and a language learning game. This isn't quite an educational game, but it's definitely a very unique entry that does actually have Furigana, voice acting, push to continue, and you can even display both the Japanese, the English, just the Japanese, just the English, the Japanese, and then the English afterwards. It's very customizable for a language learner. On one hand, this game could be a great toe dipper game, not necessarily for actually teaching you Japanese, but for dipping your toes into a Japanese environment. You could play this game in English and listen to the Japanese audio, and then get slowly introduced to Japanese vocabulary. Or you could switch the text to Japanese and try and take the language at your own pace, breaking things down with a dictionary, for example, with toggleable Furigana replayable audio, and you can even switch it to English to make sure you understand correctly. There's really not too many games that have ever been made that give you this much customization based on your needs. If you wanted to get used to Japanese sounds, you could play this game in English and just listen to the Japanese, and you can replay it as much as you want. So that's great. So you don't have to be too intimidated to be completely immersed in Japanese, and you can just learn little bits here and there with vocabulary. I think that's how this game is really intended to be played. But if you wanted, you could also ramp up the difficulty and switch the text to Japanese with the Furigana, or toggling it on and off, as well as the English. The gameplay is not that great from an educational standpoint, however, as the Japanese in this section is really just a name of an attack that you use, and then you see a visual which matches with the word you choose, which could perhaps help reinforce some of the imagery of some of the words. But the battles aren't really an educational battle system. You're just choosing an attack and seeing a visual. So I'm not going to give a tier placement for this game, and I don't necessarily know what level this game is recommended for. On one hand, it's good for people who are really complete beginners and they want to be introduced to the occasional piece of Japanese vocabulary, while also listening to Japanese audio. You could use it if you're starting to get in a bit more of an intermediate level, and this is where you would actually use the Furigana, with the main strength of this game for an intermediate learner being that it's voice acted, push to continue with Furigana, even if the whole game isn't necessarily in Japanese. But it could definitely be useful for someone depending on your particular needs. Just keep in mind though that this game is really an English game that occasionally teaches you Japanese vocabulary, with the ability to toggle the story text into Japanese, although the NPCs still mostly only talk in English. Also, I'd like to quickly just add The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, as this game just came out just as I was about to finish editing this video. This game is actually way better than the previous game, because not only does it have way more story, the world is actually 8 times the size of the previous game, so there's a huge explorable world with so many NPCs you can actually engage with. Not only that, all of the items have full Furigana, the game is completely accessible for a language learner, and there's even a Pokédex-style encyclopedia that has written descriptions with Furigana of all of the moves or all of the monsters that you learn their abilities for. That makes this game definitely an A-tier game. So it is just as good, if not better, than any of the other Zelda games. Although some of the other Zelda games do have a bit more narrative and a bit more story, this game still has dungeons and there's moments where you won't see dialogue for a while. But because you have the companion that you talk to as you do the dungeons, and you have the Pokédex style information that you get every time you capture a new monster's ability, it kind of nullifies the downtime in the more gameplay heavy sections of the game. So The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom definitely deserves to be in the A tier. And so there you have it. That is the top 100 or 150 games that have Furigana. And these are all the very best games. There are still around 100 more games that I've compiled on my spreadsheet, and I'll go through them very briefly, but I just want to quickly summarize everything that we have here. And so what I'm now going to do is I'm going to go through the whole tier list and kind of finalize my decision on the tier placement, as well as even show my personal recommendations in each tier. And just remember that all of this information is available both on the Game Gengar website as well as the spreadsheet in the link below. And I will be updating this resource whenever games come out, and also community submissions are very welcome to help continue to build this resource for everyone. So let's first add some of the games that we found in the process of making this video. So we have all of the Doraemon games, and these are all A+ except for Miracle Island, with very easy language. So for the time being, let's just put them at the very top of A+, just for the time being. And then we have Miracle Island here in the A tier. Then we have the 2 Crayon Shinchan games that I found that are also in the A+. And then finally, we have the special mention of Wagotabi. And because this is actually a Japanese language learning game, I should probably put it somewhere in the S tier. While the whole thing isn't in Japanese, you kind of slowly level up your Japanese. First, you start in English or some other languages, but you do acquire, I think I'll put it in like S- because it does have the negative that it's not fully in Japanese, but because it is a Japanese learning game, I think it deserves to be up here in the highly recommended learning games. Okay, so first let's go through the S+ tier. And so definitely the easiest game here is we have Tanoshiku Omoshiroku Kanken Shogakusei. That's the kanji learning game. Definitely S+, and definitely the easiest in terms of the language. Then we have Junisai, definitely next in terms of difficulty. Tokyo School Life is probably next, with then Shadowverse and Famicom being here in the next difficult, and I would put Famicom as the most difficult in the S+. Personally, I'm a big fan of the kanji game as well as Famicom Detective, but Shadowverse is also quite impressive. Then in terms of the S tier, I actually want to put Yokai Watch second easiest, maybe even easiest. It's very similar to Junisai. Actually, it's aimed at around a very similar age range, so they're very accessible, very easy beginner games. Then we have Digimon Adventure in the S tier. We have the Danball battles at the next. Gaist Crusher, very similar level range here. Then we have Inazuma 11 with Gundam AGE. It's a little bit more sci-fi. Ni no Kuni, still a very accessible game, but because of the fact that it has Kansai dialect and some difficult dialects, it does make it a little bit more trickier. Dragon Quest 11 and then Decapolice and Dragon Quest 3 we don't know yet, but for the time being, they're in the S tier. Then for the S- tier, we have the 2 Crayon Shinchan Boku no Natsuyasumi style games. Although the first one is more like a Boku no Natsuyasumi, the second one is a little bit different, but still incredible. Definitely the most accessible in the S-. Next, actually, maybe another Code would be a little bit easier than Gakuen Y. And then perhaps Layton could be a little bit easier than Ni no Kuni. It's kind of similar. Now we're starting to get into a little bit more fantasy stuff, so it's a little bit more difficult. Actually, Wagotabi should be at the very beginning in terms of the easiest in terms of difficulty for sure. And so all of these S tier games are pretty much flawless. There's no real issues that you're going to have using this to learn Japanese with. The only real difficulty will be the actual level of the language. Then we have the A tier, so we have all of the A+, A, and A-. This is a very big tier. So let's have a look in terms of difficulty. This one's a tough one. And so first in the A+, I'm going to have Yokai Watch 1 for the 3DS, 2 and 3 as the very easiest. After playing them a bit more, I do agree they're probably the easiest in terms of level. Perhaps Yokai Watch 4 could also be next after that. Then it gets a little bit tricky as we have all of the Crayon Shinchan games and the Doraemon games, and these are aimed at children, so the language will be more accessible, but there is a bit more slang as well because they're trying to be funny and silly and more interesting, right? Yokai Watch also has a bit of that. So I am going to put these games next in terms of difficulty. Just know though that there will be some stuff that's like, you'll not necessarily come across it in a textbook. Then probably the Pokemon Dungeon games, I think, is a right place to put it there. Inazuma 11 GO definitely deserves to be next after that. And then Yokai Busters and Sangokushi, probably good to put there. Although personally, I feel like Monster Hunter Stories may actually be even easier than Yokai Watch Busters. It's got quite nice approachable language. Wait a second, you deserve to be in the S-. I graduated you. So you should be probably here. I would say easier than Ni no Kuni because you don't have the problem. I'd say easier than the Layton games. Sorry. So S-. We also have Monster Hunter Stories. Monster Hunter Stories 2, this would be a little bit, 2 is a bit more difficult than 1 actually. No, 2 deserves to be back here. The Nazo Monogatari games are tricky because the difficulty, the actual language isn't so difficult, but the fact that you must understand what's going on in order to progress, I think makes it a bit more difficult, even if the language itself isn't so difficult. Time Travelers, we demoted. Time Travelers goes down into the A tier. Then we have Dragon Ball and Naruto games, and then Fairy Tail, so the kind of more anime games. I would kind of put these all at a very similar level. The Layton games, that's tough. Like, I could put the Layton games as easier. Maybe I should. But I do think as learning games, the actual puzzles can sometimes get in the way of the learning experience, because if you can't do the puzzles like me, you're kind of stuck. I think let's just keep them as a bit more difficult. And then we get into the more challenging levels. We have Buddy Mission Bond and stuff. I think Megaton Musashi is easier than Buddy Mission Bond. Then we're kind of getting into more fantasy stuff. So Buddy Mission Bond, Zen Nintendo, the Bayonetta Origins game, Demon Slayer, Dragon Quest X, Shin Megami Tensei 4, definitely getting a bit more difficult here, and then Okami is probably the most difficult. But Shin Megami Tensei is also pretty difficult as well. In terms of recommendations for the A+, this is really tough. There's so many incredible games. Actually, I'd pretty much recommend every single one of them, except I would less recommend Busters 1 and 2, Sangokushi, maybe the Layton games because of the puzzles, but they're still really good. Zen Nintendo, a little bit less. The rest are incredible. I love the A+ tier so much, so it's very hard to give a recommendation. But you should definitely try out level 5's Nazo no Monogatari. Okay, next moving on to the A tier. So we have the Kiseki no Shima for the Doraemon games. This is probably the easiest, although it's tricky with some of the slang. Next we have the Mario RPG games, so they're all very, very approachable and easy. Paper Mario, also very, very approachable and easy, so they're all very, very good. Same with Super Mario RPG, that is just a ton of beginner-friendly games. Yep, after that, Mickey Mouse and stuff, that's also really easy. Next, Inazuma, yeah, they're all kind of very similar level language. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet is perhaps a bit more difficult now, but not too many games I would say is like way easier. Maybe the Hero Bank you could put as a little bit easier than Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Then we have Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, we have Sushi Strikers, Girls RPG. These are a very similar level. Sonic and Mario at the Tokyo Olympics, another Code R, Spy Family, Animal Crossing. It's a little bit more difficult because there is some Keigo and stuff. Fantasy Life games, now we're getting a little bit more fantasy speech, so we have two of them. Snack World, again, very, very similar. Then we have the Zelda games, which are a little bit more difficult but still approachable, with Twilight Princess, Skyward Sword, Wind Waker, A Link Between Worlds, Majora's Mask, and Ocarina of Time, all at the A tier. Then we have the Yu-Gi-Oh games, which the story is pretty easy, but the cards have a little bit more difficult language. So we have all the Tag Force games, there's 6 of them. Legacy Duelist, which is probably my personal favorite. More Tag Force games, Tag Force Special, and then Rush Duel games. After that, we have Blue Dragon, Dragon Quest, and then here I've changed Wild Arms, so these are no longer A tier games. All of these are actually B+ games. So I'll put the Wild Arms games down to B+. Then we have the Naruto X Boruto, which is really difficult. I'm going to put this as the most difficult, not because of necessarily the language, but because of the experience. Same thing with Time Travelers. They're a bit more difficult. The overall experience is more difficult. Oh, and we also have Malice Code, which was the other game like Tokyo School Life. A little bit more difficult, but here in the S+, very similar to Tokyo School Life. My personal recommendations for the A tier would probably just be the Mario RPG Paper Mario games. Zelda's also a real winner, and if you want a big RPG, play Dragon Quest VII. Okay, now moving on to the A- tier. So we have Mario Golf Super Rush. Yep, that's pretty easy. We have the Taiko Adventure game. That's also very easy. Beyblade, that's really easy. In fact, it's probably the easiest. Girls Mode, they're also very easy, very, very approachable. I'm not sure if I can make them easier or less easier than these other games. It's kind of difficult. Let's make them a little bit easier just because of the fact that they are kind of real life language, so that should lower the level a bit. The Doraemon Harvest Moon game with voice acting, yep, that's probably a good place for it. Mario and Rabbids now getting a little bit more technical and difficult. The Layton game, that's tough, maybe a bit easier than Mario and Rabbids in terms of language. Connected Battlers is also very easy. That should maybe be a bit more easier than Rabbids as well. Then we have Dragon Quest Treasures and Dragon Quest Builders 2. Golden Sun, I don't know, that's tough. There's so much reading in there, so much language. I think I'm actually gonna put that a bit more difficult. Zelda, Phantom Hourglass, and Spirit Tracks, they're very easy. In fact, they actually deserve to be a little bit easier, probably easier than the Layton games. That's probably a decent place for them. Then we have Dragon Quest IX, the Digimon Redigitize, Pokemon Arceus, Golden Sun, and then Tears of the Kingdom with probably the most difficult language. Golden Sun's also really difficult. Pokemon Arceus is as well. Personal recommendations are a bit tough. These are starting to get into games that I don't recommend so much. I don't really love any of these games. I'm not really going to give any recommendations in this tier, but there are some interesting options like Mario Golf. Of course, the Layton games are incredible. I had a lot of fun with Dragon Quest Builders 2, but there are some big downsides. Pokemon Arceus is probably some of the most fun I've ever had playing a Pokemon game, but there's some tricky stuff about it. Okay, now moving on to the B+ tier, and there's definitely some corrections. So we have the Doraemon and Shinchan games. As I said, these definitely need to change. So this Doraemon game deserves to be with the other Doraemon games up in the A+. This Shinchan game, Gekiatsu Oden Warudo, this was an S-, incredibly, incredibly good. In terms of difficulty, It's actually maybe even easier than the Boku no Natsuyasumi games. Maybe a bit more difficult. It's Shinchan. They're all Shinchan, so they're all very, very similar in terms of difficulty. Actually, you know what? That Naruto Boruto game really rubbed me the wrong way with some of its problems. I'm going to demote it down to the B+. It really is a tough time, and it definitely is more difficult to use than Time Travelers, so yeah, I think it deserves to be in the B+. The fact that most of the game you really need to force to use because you have to press the pause button makes it a very difficult game to love. This is kind of cheating, but I'm adding another game that I found, and this is Doramoji. This actually teaches you how to write kanji and even hiragana and stuff. It does have furigana push to continue. It has a very basic story mode, and you can choose any level of Japanese from preschool, kindergarten, all the way to grade 6. There's a lot of practice here. So this is an interesting one. I'm going to put this at the B+ just for now, because it's not necessarily the greatest learning game, but it's very, very easy. I'm going to put this at the very, very beginning of the B+. Then we have Oshiri Tante and Koupen-chan, Princess Peach Showtime, and then the Doraemon Harvest Moon game that doesn't have voice acting. You have the WanNyan Pet Shop, Sonic World Adventure. That's pretty easy, although we have these Monogatari games, so perhaps they should kind of be at a similar level here with these Harvest Moon games. Actually, WanNyan Pet Shop could be a little bit easier. Let's put it up here. Then we have Sonic World Adventure. Yep, Little Town Hero. Maybe Little Town Hero is a little bit more easier than Sonic World Adventure. Then Naruto Ultimate Hero 1 for the PS2. Chocobo Dungeon could perhaps be a little bit easier. Ever Oasis. Yep, that's probably a right placement. Then we have Pikmin 3, and Pikmin 4 got a promotion up to the A-, so we'll probably put Pikmin 4, around about this level is not too bad, perhaps next to Super Mario, somewhere around here. The Denpa Ningen RPG game got demoted out of this list, so down to the B-. That left a bad taste in my mouth. Then we have the Wild Arms games. So first, in terms of the most easiest or the most recommended, I'd probably put the ones with voice acting, that's 4 and 5. Then it's Wild Arms 3 that doesn't have voice acting, and then Alter Code F that has a funky font. With then Crimson Shroud being pretty difficult language, but a very interesting entry, Breath of the Wild also being a difficult one to use, and then Naruto X Boruto here at the very end. And then in the B+ tier, there aren't really too many games I love. And then finally with the B tier, we have Super Mario Odyssey, Galaxy 1, and Galaxy 2. And these 3 games I absolutely adore. I love them. I actually think that I prefer the Galaxy games over the Odyssey games after playing a bit more. While Odyssey does have a lot of language with things like the maps that you can read that are really interesting, I actually think that Galaxy 1 and 2 are easier than Odyssey. And the gameplay balance is just perfect for someone who's just wanting to play a fun game and learn some Japanese along the way. The story is never too overbearing, and you really get excited when you see an NPC somewhere on the stage and you're like, yes, finally a chance to read some Japanese. While there isn't heaps of dialogue, that's why they're down in the B tier, they are really great experiences. And actually, these could actually be some of the most recommended games if you're looking for a very, very light experience, but still be immersed somewhat in Japanese. In terms of actual personal enjoyment, I would put these games up in like the A+ tier, but I'm trying to be as objective as possible with the ranking. So there you have it. That is the top 100 or 150, as well as my personal favorite games that have furigana to help you learn Japanese with. So now what I'm going to do is just go very quickly through the remainder games. We have about 100 more remainder games, but I'll be going through very, very quickly just because I did a lot of research to find almost literally every single game that exists that has furigana. There may be some games that aren't on this list that I happen to miss. If there are, feel free to let me know in the comments down below, or even submit them on the actual spreadsheet. There's a link that you can click and you can submit any game and actually help me build this database, because what I'm trying to do is create something so that any learner of Japanese, if you're wanting to get into playing games that are Japanese, you can use this resource to find out exactly what games have what bonuses and what benefits for you to best fit you and your needs for playing to enjoy learning Japanese with. So I will be updating this list from here on outwards whenever there's a new game coming out, a trailer and stuff. I'll be keeping my eye out and adding things, and I'd really appreciate if you guys did as well, adding to the community submissions so that we can help continue to grow this resource so that it's useful for everyone to enjoy learning Japanese with. So let's go through the remainder 100 very, very quickly. So as you can see, the top 100 pretty much ends like at the very beginning of the B tier. So we're going to be starting at the B tier. So here's my spreadsheet with all of the information that I've gathered. So as we can see at the very top here in the B tier, we have Kirby and the Forgotten Land, B tier, Furigana, push to continue, and it's available on the Nintendo Switch. We then have a bunch of 3DS, Kirby Battle Royale, Kirby Hunters Z. Both of these games also have Furigana and push to continue. Then we have the Luigi Mansions games for the Nintendo Switch, both 2 and 3. These have Furigana and push to continue. Metroid Prime Federation Force for the Nintendo 3DS also has Furigana and push to continue. Then we have a game for the PlayStation 1, which was incredible. This one's called Mikagura Shoujo Tanteidan. This is a visual novel with full Furigana and push to continue on the PlayStation PlayStation 1. Then we have Persia and the Magic Labyrinth here on the Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 4 and 5, with Furigana push to continue and sometimes Japanese voice, but not too much. We have Pikmin 2 for the Switch as well in the B tier with Furigana push to continue. The Dead Heat Breakers, a game where you play as like an armadillo that rolls around and stuff, B tier, Furigana push to continue. Weapon Shop de Omase, another game with Furigana and push to continue. We have another Yu-Gi-Oh game on the Nintendo Wii that's not as good as the other games, but it does have push to continue and Furigana. We have another game on the DS, Zack to Ombra. This has Furigana push to continue, and it also has Japanese voice in the cutscenes, but those cutscenes are not pausable. Now moving on to the B-, we have some interesting Art Academy games. These are really cool. You actually can learn how to actually draw using your DS, here the 3DS, and you have Art Academy lessons for everyone. There's Disney Art Academy, and there's even Pokemon Art Academy. So whether you're interested in Disney, Pokemon, or just art in general, you can actually be taught how to paint in Japanese. Really, really cool games with Furigana and push to continue. We have a Detective Conan game for the Nintendo Switch with Furigana and push to continue. We have another one of those kind of card game spin-off type things, Future Card Buddy Fight on the Nintendo 3DS with Furigana and push to continue. A bunch of the Mario Party games also have Furigana and push to continue. The only reason they didn't make it into this video is because they just don't have that much actual language. It's mostly just like roll the dice, it's your turn, that type of stuff. But here in the B-, Mario Party Island Tour for the 3DS, Mario Party Star Rush for the 3DS, Mario Party Superstars for the Nintendo Switch, all of these have Furigana and push to continue. And I believe the upcoming Jamboree game will also have it as well. Another game in the B- is Metroid Prime Remastered. While this game doesn't have too much dialogue, it does actually have Furigana, so you can actually play this game in Japanese with Furigana. Another game for the Nintendo Switch is actually Miitopia. This game made it into one of my other tier lists, but unfortunately not in this one. There's just way too many games competing that are excellent games with have Furigana. So Miitopia on the Nintendo Switch is also available. Then we have the Naruto games for the Nintendo Wii. There are 3 games. These have Furigana, push to continue in the dialogue, and also Japanese voice. But unfortunately, the cutscenes are not pausable, and they only have kanji for the higher level kanji. And so that unfortunately didn't make it into this video for the very best games. Then we actually have a sequel or a spin-off of the Okami games, and this is Okami Den. This is kind of a cuter version. This one has Furigana, although not always. It seems only like the first time the word appears and then it disappears or something. I'm not even sure how it works. And then it doesn't have any voice acting with push to continue. We then have Pokemon Conquest for the Nintendo DS. This is kind of like a strategy RPG type Pokemon game, like think like Fire Emblem type thing. Furigana and push to continue. There's also Pokemon Rumble World as well on the 3DS that has Furigana and push to continue. Another game on the 3DS is Sakurai Samurai. This is an interesting entry. Furigana push to continue. It's mostly gameplay, but there is some story, and you can walk around and talk to people in this kind of cool samurai setting, so quite cool to have this one. Another game that has Furigana is actually the Smash Brothers game. So we have Smash Brothers 3DS, as well as the Wii U version, and Smash Brothers Ultimate. All of these games have Furigana and push to continue, just unfortunately not too much story. Most of the language is in the loading screens when you see like information about stuff, and maybe if you look at the information about certain objects and stuff, you may find some Furigana, but it's not going to be too much to actually use as a learning game. But hey, it has something. We then have some more adorable games here on the Nintendo Switch with Sumiko Gurashi. This has Furigana and push to continue. Super Mario Bros. Wonder also has Furigana and push to continue. Not too much story though, but there is some story as you're progressing through the levels, and actually the flowers speak Japanese, which is really cool, but they don't say too much, and it's usually just a off comment here and there. It's not really any dialogue you can use to study with. Some other games that unfortunately didn't make it in the top 100 is The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening. This is a B-. It has Furigana and push to continue, but just not that much story. It's mostly a dungeon puzzle game where you go around and explore the world and get unlockables, and you can go to the next area, and there's a few NPCs you can engage with and talk with, and so I just don't feel like it's necessarily as good as all the other games we saw in this video. It's kind of similar to Mario Galaxy, but personally I felt like Mario Galaxy games actually had a little bit more dialogue, because there were NPCs kind of waiting around to say, hey, talk to me, like toads on an island somewhere, and they're like, hey, talk to me for a bit, or like instructions and stuff. Whereas Link's Awakening was more just talking to the people in town and then going off and doing a thing. So I feel like I had a little bit less. Another game we have is the Rolling Western for the Nintendo 3DS. This is just like the Dead Heat Breakers, Furigana push to continue. It's the same game series actually. Then we have Tomodachi Life for the Nintendo 3DS. This is kind of cute, Furigana push to continue, and the guy's kind of talking like a bit of a robot voice, and it's almost like The Sims. So this is actually kind of an interesting one if you want to learn Japanese in kind of like a Sims type environment. This is an interesting one. I actually played this for a little bit myself. There's Mario Party Jamboree. So we don't know what it is yet, but it could be a B- if it's the same as all the other Mario Party games. If it has more story, it could be higher. Now moving on to the C tier, we have the Demon Slayer Mario Party games. These are kind of similar really to Mario Party, so they might be B-. Not too much story, but it's mostly just like Mario Party, but with Demon Slayer characters and stuff. Another game that's kind of aimed at kids is Dora Think. This has Furigana and push to continue, as well as a little bit of voice acting, but it's mostly like a game that's really aimed at like toddlers to figure out shapes and stuff. But it could be an easy game if you want to check it out. There's also another one of those comfy games here. What is this called? Geshizu Kaji Kaji Nakama o Sodateo. This game also for the Nintendo Switch and has Furigana push to continue. Kid Icarus Uprising. This game has Furigana and it has so much voice acting. This is for the Nintendo 3DS, but unfortunately, all of the dialogue is happening as you play the game. So that makes it incredibly distracting to play. The only way to do it is to pause, but if you pause, the cutscene text is actually blocked. So you have to move the cutscene text. Thankfully, you can actually do that. You can move the text to the other screen. So now the text is now on the main screen that you're playing on. And when you press pause, it's now visible. But man, it's so tricky because it's an action game where you're kind of flying around shooting stuff and you're trying to focus on things. Then there's a piece of dialogue you have to quickly pause in order to read. And it's just, it doesn't really make for a cohesive learning experience. It is passable, but not really a great learning experience. That's why it's in the C tier. We have Kirby Robo Planet for the 3DS as well. Furigana push to continue. The original Mario and Rabbids Kingdom Battle. This is for the Nintendo Switch. Furigana push to continue. Real Escape game for the Nintendo 3DS. Furigana push to continue. Run for the Money, The Great Mission on the Switch. Furigana push to continue. We have The Legend of Zelda Triforce Heroes. Also Furigana push to continue. Then we have WarioWare Move It for the Nintendo Switch. This has Furigana not push to continue, but it does have Japanese voices. It's an interesting one because there's like all of a sudden very short commands that tell you to do something like dodge out of the way, sweep the floor. And so you can actually kind of, through actually engaging with the language, actually immerse and learn some of the language as you're actually doing the actions that the language is saying, but it goes by a little bit too fast to really use, so it's a difficult one. Ape Escape 2 for the PlayStation 2 and PlayStation 4 has Furigana push to continue and even voice acting. This is a really good one, but I just didn't quite feel it was up to the same quality as all the other ones. We also have a train game here for the Nintendo Switch, Android, and Microsoft Windows that has Furigana and push to continue. We're now moving into the C-. Another game is interesting. We have Kunitsugami Path of the Goddess. This is available on PlayStation 4, 5, Windows, and even Xbox. This has Furigana, but only on the kanji above Kente level 4, which is pretty tough. We're now getting into high school, right? So we're getting a little bit higher level, starting to become an adult. This is definitely a tricky game, and the Furigana is really only on really difficult kanji. And unfortunately, the text goes automatically, so it's not very usable, but you could use it, so it's a pass. We have a Momotaro train game here on the Nintendo Switch. There's actually two of these games. We have the Showa Heisei Reiwa game, which is based on the history of Japan. And then we have the World Tour one where you go around the world. Both of these games do have Furigana. I wish these games were better and more educational. And actually, Japanese kids get to use these games in their schools and it actually teaches you about the area and stuff. Why can't we have those games? Unfortunately, only Japanese schools have access to that version of the game. These games are a little bit more like Mario Party, but without the simple dialogue, and it just doesn't really work for me. These games aren't that great for learning Japanese with. We have Nintendogs and Cats. This does actually have Furigana and push to continue, but just very little dialogue. One Piece Round the Land for the PS2 also has Furigana voice acting and push to continue, but it's kind of like, think about like a Donkey Kong where you have like the stages. There's just a little bit of voice acting at the beginning of a stage. That's it. Not a big thing. Also, Shashingo, a Japanese learning game on, I believe, Steam, as well as maybe even soon Nintendo Switch. This does actually have some Furigana, just not too much, and push to continue. It's more of like a photo game where you learn vocabulary with actual immersion. You're seeing this, take a photo, and you can kind of read it, but it has Furigana when you highlight over stuff. Star Fox Command for the Nintendo Wii U and DS also has Furigana push to continue. The two cute Yoshi games, Yoshi Craft World and Yoshi's Woolly World, also has Furigana push to continue. And now moving into the D tier, these are games that really aren't that usable for learning, perhaps because it's just too challenging to really use. We have Dragon Quest Infinity Strash that has Furigana and voice acting, but automatic text. Hyrule Warriors, they're unfortunately not that great. They only have Furigana, no voice acting, automatic text. We have some of the Inazuma 11 games, Nintendo Wii, not that great for learning. Killer 7 has Furigana, but it's in katakana, and then it only has English dub. Weird, but this game also has Furigana. Klonoa, this game also has Furigana, which is interesting. We have some of the Naruto games for the PlayStation 2, Uzumaki Chronicles and Konoha Spirits. These actually do have Furigana and voice acting, but unfortunately the whole thing is a movie and you can't pause it. So it's really only usable as listening practice. Sonic and the Black Knight for the Nintendo Wii also has Furigana and voice acting, but not push to continue, so it's the same thing as the Naruto games. Super Bomberman R also has Furigana. Super Mario 3D World also does. The Wonderful 101 Remastered also has Furigana and voice acting, but not push to continue. The other Hyrule Warriors game, Age of Calamity, also has Furigana and voice acting, but not push to continue. Pokemon Picross has Furigana and push to continue, just not too much text. And then Mega Man Legends 2 has Furigana and voice acting in the cutscenes, but not push to continue. And that's the end of the D tier. And then finally, we have the F tier. And I found two games that do have some Furigana, but really are just not passable as learning games. And that's Captain Toad Treasure Tracker and Mario Strikers. The Furigana is really only in like the instructional language, like press A to continue and stuff like that. It's really not that much. It does have Furigana, but really not usable. And there we have it. My God, I hope that video wasn't too long, but I have a feeling it's going to be monstrously long because this took me close to 10 hours to record all this. But there you go. That is a very comprehensive look at almost all of the games that have Furigana to help you learn Japanese with. I've gone through the whole history of video games, so I'm pretty sure I found almost everything. And so hopefully there's one or two games that you may find interesting. I think this list is pretty varied, so there's probably something for someone no matter what type of person you are. There really does seem to be something for someone. So hopefully there's a game somewhere here that helps you enjoy learning Japanese with. And really don't feel bad about using Furigana. I know some people kind of have this mentality like you're not allowed to look at the answer. You need to test yourself. You need to make sure you're always pushing yourself hard. But seriously, as long as you're looking at both the Furigana and the kanji, eventually those two things will kind of assimilate into one. You'll kind of just recognize them both. Your brain will just connect the meanings. And eventually, even if you don't see the Furigana, you'll still be able to read the word. And that really is the most important thing. The whole philosophy behind playing games in Japanese is to be enjoying the Japanese journey, not to be killing yourself trying to do SRS reviews all the time and, oh my God, I have 1,000 to do, which is really stressful. It makes you feel like a bit of a robot, and it's not that enjoyable. Furigana games are here to help you get into actually reading Japanese, because that's really what's going to help you kind of get a feel for the context, how language is used. You're going to get much better at sentence structure, which is also going to help your speaking. You're going to be able to now read books and play games and watch anime and read manga. It's just so beneficial. But the main thing isn't to spend like half an hour on one word and go, what does this mean? Instead, the point is to kind of go through it a little bit quicker. It's all about quantity, because if you play like 20 games on this list, your Japanese reading comprehension is going to be so much higher than when you started. And if you play the next 20, it's going to be super higher than when you started. As long as you make sure that you look at the Furigana and the kanji, not just the Furigana, that's just cheating yourself. Make sure you look at both. And the goal isn't to learn that word once. As soon as you see it, you have to memorize it. No. The whole point is that you're going to be seeing that used word hundreds of times, maybe even thousands of times. And the more times you see it, the more likely it's going to stay in your head. The more likely you're going to understand the context in which it's used. And eventually, by the time it's sunk in, you're not going to need the Furigana. It's very much like training wheels. You need them in the beginning, but if you just stay hunked to one side riding like that, you're not going to learn how to ride. So you need to have it in the middle. You need to try to rely on them when you can, but try your best to actually read the kanji and stay in the middle. And using Furigana this way, you will definitely improve your Japanese. You'll definitely learn how to read kanji. It just takes time. So have fun learning Japanese. Hopefully there's a game in this video you like. If you did find something, let me know in the comments down below. A huge thanks and love heart to all of the supporters of the Game Gengo channel, either on the website as well as on Patreon, and all the people on the Game Gengo Discord community. It's all thanks to you that I'm able to make these videos. So seriously, thank you so much for all of your support. I'm so glad you're enjoying learning Japanese and having fun with these videos. It really is an honor. Thank you so much. I have so many more videos to make. I gotta get back into making the grammar videos and the kanji videos and the vocab series. This video was just way bigger than I imagined, but I'm glad I got it done, because now we have a definitive answer. What games are good to start playing in Japanese? What Furigana games are good? How many games are there that have Furigana? That is now answered. So thanks so much guys for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, leave a comment, subscribe, and come join us on the Game Gengo Discord community. You can join us through the website or through Patreon. And it's not just the community, you even get help with your Japanese. We have live Japanese help, so whenever you have a question, you can ask and get help. You can hang out in streams and stuff, chat with me in the community. And if you found any games that interest you in this video and you want to import them, feel free to use the Amazon affiliate link down below. It doesn't just have to be for games. Anytime you buy something on Amazon, about 1% or so goes to Game Gengo instead of going to Amazon, so you can kind of support the channel indirectly like that. So thanks so much guys for watching. I hope you have a blast playing Japanese games, and as always, I'll see you all again in the next video. Whew, we're done. See ya.